My girlfriend overheard my family talking badly about her. I'm 35 years old. My girlfriend Sammy is 30, and we've been together for a little over a year. She is wonderful, smart, attractive, driven, educated, kind, and a little quirky. She has everything I've ever wanted in a partner. Until last week, I truly believed my family felt the same way about her. Last week, I went to my parents' house for our usual family dinner. We get together several times a month. It's a long-standing tradition. Normally, Sammy joins us, but that evening she had work obligations, so I told my family she wouldn't be coming. Halfway through dinner, I got up to use the bathroom when I received a text from Sammy saying she was outside. She had finished work early and decided to stop by just to spend some time with me. Normally, she would have walked straight in, which is completely fine, but this time she needed help carrying some gifts. The next day, Sammy was leaving for a work trip and then heading on vacation with friends, so she wouldn't be back until Thanksgiving. My brother and sister, they're twins, had birthdays coming up the following week, and Sammy had prepared gifts for them. At that moment, my family didn't know she was there. We walked into the house and headed toward the kitchen, and that's when we overheard them. My sister was saying how relieved she was that Sammy hadn't come because my annoying girlfriend always ruined family dinners just by being there. My brother and my other sister agreed, calling her irritating and unpleasant. My father said they should at least be polite to her. Then my mother joined in. She said that Sammy was nice enough, but she couldn't understand how I could be attracted to someone so fat, and that I could easily find someone much better. Everyone, even my father, agreed with her. Then my sister added that I was dating below my level because I still hadn't fully recovered from my breakup with my ex 5 years ago. I was completely stunned. My family had always been kind to Sammy. I had never once heard them say anything cruel about her, or about anyone, really. Sammy walked into the kitchen, silently set the gifts down on the counter, and through tears muttered something like, "Happy birthday." Then she ran out the door. My family looked shocked and deeply uncomfortable. I asked them what the hell was wrong with them and didn't wait for an answer. I ran after Sammy. She was sitting in her car, crying. Sammy is usually very strong, but family means everything to her. She has no real family of her own, only an alcoholic father she no longer has contact with. My family had become her family. It was the family she had always dreamed of having. She was genuinely happy when they welcomed her and started inviting her to family events. The gifts she brought my siblings were paintings she had spent hours working on. Yes, she's overweight, but to me, she's beautiful, exactly as she is. And since we started dating, she's lost around 18 kilograms. I would love her at any weight, and I'm proud of the work she's done. I don't understand how they could call her annoying. She only comes when she's invited. She usually brings baked goods or beer. She's taken my family out to dinner many times and paid for everyone. She's incredibly generous. She even became my sister's regular babysitter for her 2 kids. She helped my brother get a job at her company, personally vouching for him and risking her professional reputation. She never asked for anything in return and never threw it in anyone's face. She even washes dishes when we visit for dinner. What makes this even worse is that I was planning to propose to her in the next few months. I was going to ask my sisters to help me pick out a ring. Now Sammy barely talks about what happened. She doesn't really discuss it with me. She's always wanted a family, and she can't understand why my family doesn't like her or what she did wrong. She told me she would talk when she got back from vacation. I don't want to lose her over this. I would choose her over my family without hesitation. Since the incident, she hasn't been her usual cheerful self. I've caught her crying more than once. I try to comfort her, but she keeps pretending she's fine. At this point, I don't even know if I want my family in my life. They've all reached out with weak apologies, full of excuses. When I asked my mother whether she had apologized directly to Sammy, she said I could just pass the apology along. They all claim to feel ashamed, but none of them can explain exactly why Sammy was annoying or how she supposedly ruined family gatherings. The only reasonable person has been my father. He offered to apologize to Sammy in person. Update 1. I told Sammy clearly that she's my priority, not my family, and that I would do whatever it takes to make her feel safe and comfortable. I was terrified she might leave me because of this, but I think she knows I'm fully on her side. What makes this situation especially painful is her past. Her family history is tragic, and she never deserved any of it. Her mother died when she was young. Instead of coping with his grief, her father turned to alcohol. She has always said that the day her mother died was the day she became an orphan. Within 18 months, she also lost her grandmother, grandfather, and aunt, the only good relatives she had left. She's been living independently since she was 15. I had a conversation with my sister that ended with me telling her to go to hell. She couldn't give a single concrete reason for what bothered her about Sammy. Her only excuse was that she never thought Sammy or I would overhear them. When I met Sammy, she wasn't alone. She built her own family from friends. She surrounds herself with people who love her and whom she loves back. She doesn't allow toxic people into her life. Maybe she idealized my family because from the outside, we really did look like the perfect, wholesome family. I believed that too. I decided to take Sammy away for Thanksgiving. I was on the phone with a very kind hotel employee trying to find a room that wasn't already booked. No matter what, I think this will become our new tradition. Quiet weekends together, while everyone else runs around preparing for the holiday. I also spoke briefly with my father. He's still in shock over everything and agreed to apologize to Sammy in person when she's ready to hear it. Sammy knows I choose her over my family and that I would choose her over anyone. Sammy and I had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We spent it in a small mountain resort town. It was a great weekend, and we talked a lot about what to do regarding my family. She was still deeply hurt, but she insisted that I shouldn't completely cut my family out of my life. I told her it would depend entirely on their behavior. My mother refused to believe that I wouldn't come to their Thanksgiving dinner. Update 2. After my previous post, I told my mother that Sammy and I would not be coming for Thanksgiving. She brushed it off until the day before the holiday when she called to make sure I was bringing a pie. I reminded her that I wouldn't be there, and she burst into tears. She said she was sorry for hurting Sammy and wanted a chance to apologize. I made it clear that such a chance would come after Thanksgiving. When we returned from our trip, my parents came over for dinner. I discussed it with Sammy beforehand. She felt my parents deserved a chance to make things right, and honestly, I think she really wanted things to improve with my family. The dinner was awkward, to say the least. My father started with a sincere apology to Sammy. He said he was deeply ashamed and genuinely wanted to make amends. They had a good, honest conversation. Talking with my mother was more complicated. She cried most of the time and kept emphasizing how sorry she was. I couldn't tell whether she was truly remorseful or just upset that I had taken Sammy's side. I don't think Sammy was sure either. A few days later, my mother called Sammy and invited her to lunch to talk privately. Many people had suggested that my family likely found Sammy annoying because of their own insecurities or because they were projecting their issues onto her. That turned out to be spot on. Sammy went to lunch with my mom, and they had a long, meaningful conversation. Sammy said my mom admitted she felt jealous of how educated Sammy was and the opportunities she had. Sammy, in turn, admitted she envied my mom for having a large, close-knit family. She shared her own background and how she had been living independently since her teenage years. I think that really affected my mom, who had always been surrounded by a loving family. I believe she was genuinely horrified by her own behavior towards someone who only wanted to belong. Overall, it feels like the relationship between my parents and Sammy has improved. My younger sister reached out to Sammy after Thanksgiving. I don't think any of my siblings expected me to skip the family dinner, and I heard they were pretty angry about me going on vacation instead. My sister apologized over the phone. I don't know if it was enough, but it was a step. Sammy feels neutral toward her. She said it seemed like my sister was more sorry about getting caught, but she still appreciated the apology. My brother, whom Sammy helped get a job, had a few very uncomfortable weeks at work while Sammy was away. By Thanksgiving, he was probably convinced she wouldn't sabotage his career. When Sammy returned, he came to her office to apologize. Again, it felt more like damage control than true remorse, but he did apologize in person and didn't dodge responsibility. Sammy remains neutral toward him as well. The only one still refusing to budge is my other sister, my brother's twin. She hasn't apologized and seems angry that she no longer has a free babysitter. She insists she has nothing to apologize for and claims Sammy is the one causing problems. This has created a noticeable rift in the family. My parents want Sammy and me to come for Christmas dinner, but I'm not comfortable being around my sister right now, and I won't put Sammy through that stress. My parents even suggested that my sister stay home so we would come. I appreciate the intention, but it would feel wrong knowing she'd be alone on Christmas while her kids are with their father. Sammy has plenty of invitations from friends, while my sister likely wouldn't have many options at the last minute. Sammy told my parents she doesn't want to deepen the family divide and that we'll visit another time. She admitted to me while she has forgiven my family, she's still not comfortable spending time with them yet. That's completely fine with me. I think some distance will be healthy. We're still deciding where to spend Christmas, but we'll probably go visit my best friend. And now for the best part of the update. My best friend's wife went with me to look at engagement rings. She dragged me through all the chain stores, scoffed at identical rings with wildly different prices, and eventually took me to a local jeweler. We discussed a custom design, and the jeweler immediately understood what I wanted. She said she could start in January. A few nights ago, she sent me a photo of the stone she found to see if it matched my vision. Sammy saw the message, and it turned into a spontaneous proposal. She said yes. So now I have a fiancé. We haven't told many people yet. I'll tell my family later. For now, I'm just enjoying this time with her. Overall, we're doing well, better than I expected after everything that happened. I'm sad about my sister because I miss her and her kids, and I do miss my family, but I'm at peace with my choices. I think most relationships will heal with time, except maybe with that one sister. Sammy liked the idea of a destination wedding next summer, but we haven't planned anything yet. After everything with my family, she told me she now knows for sure that I will always be on her side and that I have truly become her family. I overheard my girlfriend mercilessly mocking me in front of her best friend, and it was brutal. My girlfriend's name is Jenna. She's 28, and we've been together for just over 2 years. I'm 33, a veterinarian, and we first met at my clinic. She had just moved to the city and brought her dog in for an ear infection. We started talking, and what was supposed to be a 15-minute appointment turned into an hour-long conversation. I had never been so captivated by a woman before. I used to live a typical bachelor lifestyle, thinking I'd probably stay single forever. My life, full of fleeting, casual encounters, was becoming increasingly dull and empty. Jenna is charismatic, with a large circle of friends, and her best friend is a guy named Dylan, whom she's known for years. I trust Jenna, but I'd be lying if I said their friendship didn't bother me. I'm not angry with her over it, and she assured me they've been lifelong friends with no romantic involvement. I'm confident enough in myself to accept their friendship, and even tried to get along with Dylan. He visited our city 3 times. He's a good guy, but it seemed like he didn't particularly like me. Jenna says he's just protective of her, but I think it's more jealousy than actual protection. Jenna had just finished graduate school this spring and was struggling to find work. We've been living together for a year, and I understand she couldn't yet contribute to rent or other expenses. I'm financially stable, so that wasn't an issue, but I didn't want my support to become an excuse for her to avoid seeking employment. I believe everyone needs financial independence, so I made it clear she should start paying half of the expenses once she got a job. On Monday, she messaged me that she had landed a job she really wanted after a tough interview. I was so proud of her that I decided to leave work early without telling her. I bought her favorite alcohol, picked up her favorite Chinese food, and a few weeks ago, I had bought her a necklace she loved in a shop. It had a small shark pendant, and she's obsessed with anything shark-related. I hid it in the basement, planning to surprise her later when she had forgotten about it. When I got home, I went through the side entrance to the basement to grab the necklace. As I climbed the stairs and opened the door, I overheard Jenna on the phone. Normally I wouldn't eavesdrop, but she was laughing until she cried. It sounded so sweet that I decided to wait until she finished the call to surprise her. She was talking to Dylan, which wasn't unusual. They spoke at least once a week. But then I caught what she was laughing about. It took me a few moments to realize she was mocking our intimate life. She said something like, "No, he doesn't even come close to my ex. My ex was at least 8 centimeters bigger. Every time I eat a tiny carrot, I feel sorry for him. It must be traumatizing to be bitten by the same size. It would almost be cute if it weren't so terrible. He has a great body until he takes off his boxers." There was a lot of laughter. Look, I don't care what strangers online think about my size, but what she was laughing at wasn't even true, which made it even more painful. I don't know about her ex, maybe he was huge, but I'm average, plain and simple. Not exceptional, but not a joke either. I've never felt insecure about it. Hearing my girlfriend discuss me with her friend, given my existing doubts about their relationship, was beyond hurtful. She also mocked me for being handsome, but not particularly smart. I'm actually well educated, so that didn't bother me. I know I'm intelligent, good-looking, and smart, with average equipment. After hearing this, I just left. Did I throw the flowers out of my car window? Yes. Did I cry in the parking lot? Yes. I think she either heard the basement door close or saw me drive off, because she quickly started texting me, asking when I'd be back. This happened on Monday, and I haven't brought it up with her since. I'm still processing it. It's painfully awkward, but damn it, I love her. I know I need to talk to her about it, but I don't know how. Any advice on how to start that conversation? I'm deeply hurt and not sure I can forgive her. I also want to add that I'm definitely planning to break up with Jenna. Today, I met 3 friends for a beer and told them what happened. Their advice matched yours. Break up and do it fast. I called my mom and told her everything too. Yes, I told her everything, even though it was embarrassing. We've always been very close, and I wanted to explain everything to her. I had never seen her so angry before. She knew that I had bought a ring for Jenna. I'll post an update once everything is settled, probably tomorrow. Emotionally, I'll be pretty shaken. Once again, thank you to everyone for the comments and support messages. I never expected so many people to take my side. Update. I finally gathered the courage and ended things with Jenna Thursday evening. Honestly, those were some of the most intense few days of my life. From Jenna's perspective, things got pretty messy. Apologies for the long post, but a lot happened. Following advice from friends, my mom, my brother, and many of you, I decided to talk to her in a public place. My reasoning was simple. Someone capable of such cruelty and dishonesty could easily twist the story, claiming I was abusive or any other nonsense. I wanted to believe she wouldn't do that, but after everything, better safe than sorry. I initially considered just packing her things and breaking up without explanation, but after 2 years together, I felt it was better to talk things through calmly and listen to her side, if she had one, even if it wouldn't change my decision to end things. I took her to a wine bar downtown that has small private booths with curtains. Since Monday, Jenna had been acting like an angel, which could mean 3 things. She felt guilty for her cruel behavior, she thought I might overhear her, or she simply noticed my distance and didn't understand why. She dressed up nicely, and I have to admit, she looked incredible despite everything. Jenna was also very affectionate, and kept dropping suggestive comments about what she wanted to do with me later, usually my cute little baby carrot. Normally I'd laugh and enjoy it, but given the circumstances, it was hard to hear and stay composed. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say many times, so once we sat down and our wine arrived, I started talking. I don't remember every word because adrenaline was off the charts. I began by telling her how deeply I loved her, how she was the only woman with whom I felt such a profound connection, someone I fully opened up to and trusted. I told her she was the only one I had considered marrying, and the reason I went shopping for a ring. I didn't mention that I had already bought it, or that I had imagined us having children in the coming years. She kept interrupting with phrases like, "Oh, how sweet," or telling me how much she loved me. Then I looked her straight in the eyes and asked her bluntly, if she loved me so much, why did she mock me so terribly in front of Dylan? Her expression gave me a certain satisfaction. As expected, Jenna initially denied everything and pretended not to understand what I meant. She claimed Dylan knew how much she loved me, and she never made fun of me in their conversations. I simply looked at her and said something like, "Come on, Jenna." Even after I explained that I came home early Monday and overheard everything, she continued to deny it. Her calmness was irritating. I told her we both knew she was lying, and what she said was inexcusable. I couldn't understand why she would say such things, especially since she lied just to laugh at me. She kept pretending I was imagining it. She insisted she loved me so much, was never dissatisfied with our intimate life, and would never complain about my size. She claimed she loved me for my intelligence and caring nature. Had I not heard it myself, I might have believed her. She deserves an Oscar for that performance. Some commenters asked if I was sure she was talking about me when discussing her ex and his crackling. She did mention my name, comparing me to him. I am completely sure she was referring to me and lying straight to my face. I told her I would drive her home so she could gather essential items from the house. My brother and his wife were there too. I wanted witnesses to confirm I let her collect her things without being aggressive. I said I'd pack the rest and leave it outside for her to take at her convenience. Jenna was shocked that I was actually ending things. She begged me to reconsider, but my decision was final. It was hard to hold back tears as she expressed how much she wanted to be with me forever and that she had planned to be the mother of my children. She kept asking what she should do now and where she would sleep. I told her that was no longer my problem and that she had plenty of friends she could stay with until she found a place of her own.
She only needed to take her clothes, toiletries, and a few personal items. Almost all furniture and decor in the house, which she had redone, had been paid for by me. And then the tears began. Jenna started crying, saying she couldn't understand how I could treat her this way. She repeated over and over that she always thought I was a good guy. I told her I am a good guy. That's exactly why I didn't throw her things on the lawn, change the locks, or leave without explanation. And then somehow she managed to twist the knife even deeper. She admitted she didn't know why she had said all those things to Dylan. Maybe it was because with him, she could laugh at things that would otherwise make her cry. Apparently, this included my penis. Normally, I don't stoop to sarcastic remarks, but I told her she was welcome to move back to her hometown and live happily with her ex and his 23-centimeter endowment. Seeing her tears vanish instantly was shocking. Clearly, in her eyes, I was a jerk, terrible with women, a failure, destined to be alone with a tiny carrot down there. She said she never really loved me, that she saw me more as a friend and stayed to avoid hurting me. Makes sense, I guess. Then she said that if I ever proposed again, she would call me a loser and a jerk. And just in case I didn't understand, she repeated her little carrot comparison. Oh, and apparently I'm doomed to die alone. I told her that dying alone is better than dying in a marriage with a woman who doesn't love or respect me. No joke. Then she just screamed. A long, unbelievably loud scream. Not even words, just pure noise. It was terrifying. After that, she ran out, calling me a disgusting pig. I had already paid the bill and apologized to the waiter for the drama. When I stepped outside, she was just standing there, crying. Even though what she did and said was awful, it still hurt to see her like that. I didn't want to just leave her outside in the cold, so I offered to drive her home so she could gather her things, but she had to stay somewhere else afterward. She agreed. The car ride was silent, incredibly awkward. When we arrived home, my brother and his wife were there. His wife stayed inside while Jenna collected her belongings, and my brother waited with me outside. The process went relatively smoothly. I left her a note explaining that her things were on the porch and she could collect them anytime I was at work. I didn't hear from Jenna all day until it was time to come home from work. She sent a vicious message wishing me every misfortune imaginable. I didn't respond. When I got home, I found my house in complete chaos. I have no idea if she made a copy of the key or somehow knew how to pick locks, but she got inside and destroyed everything. Breakable items were smashed, furniture ripped apart, and the kitchen was ruined. The only good thing she did was lock my 2 dogs in a room, probably to keep them safe from broken glass or spilled food. I have 2 cars, one for daily use and an SUV for work, which I use for house calls or transporting large or exotic animals. Among all this chaos, I remembered that I had given her the keys to the SUV in case of emergencies. She destroyed that too. Inside, flour was scattered and tomato sauce was spilled everywhere. It's just stuff, I know, but the most shocking part was that she could act so childish and destructive after everything we'd shared. Just the weekend before, we'd gone to a show, hung out with friends, played Monopoly, made up our own drinking game, watched Netflix, and even had sex multiple times. And now, my home and car were ruined, and I was left in turmoil. In a fit of anger, I immediately ordered 22-kilogram bags of mini carrots delivered to Jenna at her friend's address. 40 kilograms of tiny carrots, within an hour. That evening, I got plenty of angry and insulting messages from her. Yes, it was petty, but I don't regret it. Aside from the wasted food, hopefully she donates or cooks with them. I blocked Jenna. She's truly cruel, and I know I deserve better. Since Monday, I've reflected a lot on myself as a partner and tried to understand what might have caused her to build up resentment or dissatisfaction toward me. To be completely honest, I work hard, I make time for everyone I love, and I try not to bring stress home. Some days at work are just brutal, and today was one of them. I'll admit it. Jen and I had argued about this before, and I genuinely tried to organize my schedule so I could come home at a reasonable hour and leave the stress of work behind. But anyone who's a vet or knows someone in the field understands that we're always on call for emergencies. Sometimes we have patients that need constant monitoring or overnight care. Taking a day off is possible, but it's complicated. I have an incredible team that can handle most situations, yet even on days off or during vacations, I still get calls or messages. I'm sure there were moments when Jenna felt second to my work, and honestly, I know there were. She told me that herself. I tried to adjust, but there is only so much one can do. As far as I remember, I was never intentionally mean or rude to Jenna. Sure, there were bad days when I was irritated or distant, and we had arguments and disagreements, but nothing toxic or abusive. I really believed we had a strong relationship and that we were both happy. I was happy. Still, it's hard not to question yourself and wonder if I really had disappointed her or neglected her to the point that she felt so unloved that she acted out the way she did. I don't know. What I do know is that regardless of any perceived shortcomings on my part, her words and actions were completely unacceptable. I did not deserve any of it, and that's on her. A quick update, I filed a police report and took photos of the wrecked house, hoping it will help cover at least some of the damages under insurance. Honestly, I don't expect much from the police since I can't prove it was Jenna, and frankly, I don't want to see her again. I just hope the insurance covers the damages and I'll move forward with my life.
Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22, still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare, emotionally or financially. And the reason for all of it was my sister, Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me. By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend, Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months, and somehow it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything. They just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law, but what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day, hysterical, and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage, simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out. And just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mom threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me. They truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me too. No explanation, no chance to defend myself. And Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway. And when I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together. Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless. My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming. But slowly, I taught myself to move forward, with or without their support. Years went by, and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career, and just last week, I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes. But the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée, Lisa, posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post, For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, he explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward. After all, years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. He also admitted that since he'd blocked me back then, it felt strange to just pop back up in my life. But what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said, things just happened. To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie. Pete admitted he was furious when he found out. Instead of thinking clearly, he blocked everyone in my family, including me. Looking back, he knows it was the wrong move, but at the time, anger clouded everything.
The email itself included screenshots of conversations between Hannah and Frank. Messages where they openly confessed their love, joked about how easy it was to fool Pete, and arranged secret meetups. Hannah had even signed off using her rarely mentioned middle name, something only a few people knew. There was no denying it. Reading those messages was surreal. For the first time in years, I had undeniable proof. Hannah had lied about everything. I eventually confronted Pete in person after realizing he was in Lisa's Facebook friends list. He admitted that Emily, my friend who'd originally been accused, had told him her side years ago. He just never told me because he didn't want to stir things up again. He regretted it now, because if he had spoken up earlier, I could have cleared my name long ago. Still, he was willing to help me now. Pete and I agreed that Hannah's lies had destroyed enough lives, and neither of us wanted her manipulations to stand unchallenged any longer. The truth was clear. Hannah had weaponized her family's trust to protect herself, even if it meant sacrificing me. She dragged my name through the mud, convinced my parents to disown me, all to keep her own reputation intact while she pursued her affair. And for the first time in years, I had the evidence to finally set the record straight. I'm certain my sister never once tried to tell our parents the truth. Instead, she kept feeding them lies during the divorce, and they swallowed every word without hesitation. She knew that if our parents ever discovered she was the one who cheated, she'd be in serious trouble, and she just couldn't allow that. Well, now the truth is finally out, and I'm going to use it to destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine all those years ago. I wasn't sure if my parents were still living in the same house, since I hadn't seen them in 7 years, but an old neighbor confirmed they never moved. Even better, Hannah still lived there. That didn't surprise me at all. She was always lazy and hated responsibility. Living off aging parents while they did everything for her was exactly her style. 2 days ago, Pete and I showed up unannounced. My mom opened the door, and we pushed our way inside before she could react. My dad and Hannah were sitting in the living room, the happy family reunited, but only for a moment. Their faces twisted as soon as they saw us. My dad immediately started shouting, threatening to call the police if we didn't leave. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but only after reading the documents we brought. My parents looked confused, while Hannah turned pale and bolted to her room. I figured she was trying to avoid the inevitable, but there was no escaping it. Pete pulled out the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah's messages with Frank, while I explained the real story. Pete also revealed how Hannah had been forced to give up our grandmother's diamond heirloom ring to settle the divorce, since her teacher salary couldn't cover the payout. My parents were stunned. We sat there watching as the drama unfolded. My dad demanded answers from Hannah, but when she tried lying yet again, even with the evidence right in front of her, he'd had enough. He packed her belongings, shoved them into a bag, and kicked her out of the house on the spot. I didn't need to be told twice. Pete and I walked out together, leaving Hannah begging our parents to let her back in, exactly the way I had once begged them years ago. It was the sweetest revenge. I felt nothing but satisfaction. A couple days later, Hannah showed up at my place, demanding I fix things with our parents. I don't even know how she found my address, but I told her point blank that I owed her nothing. She ruined my life, and I simply returned the favor. We were even now. Apparently, she has no pride left, because the moment I said that, she broke down sobbing, calling me a monster. I honestly didn't care. I put on my headphones, turned up the music, and let Lisa keep working peacefully in her office. Eventually, she left, but not before scrawling a message on my door with a marker reminding me that I'm a vengeful monster. To be honest, I don't feel bad about what I did. I don't think I'm the villain here. I didn't lie or scheme like she did. I just exposed the truth. So, am I really the bad guy for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out of our parents' home 7 years after she blamed me for her divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Update 1. Hannah didn't stop bothering me. Even after a week, she kept calling nonstop, 14 times in a day. I finally threatened to involve the police, and that made her back off, at least for now. I have no idea how she keeps getting my number after I block her, but apparently she has her friends add me into group calls from different numbers. She's tried guilt-tripping me, saying her teacher salary isn't enough to live on. But I know that's not the real issue. What she really hates is finally having to pay rent, utilities, and groceries herself. And honestly, that's not my problem. As for my parents, they're not much better. They found me on Facebook after seeing Lisa's engagement post. Now they're suddenly interested in being part of my life again. They even hinted that they expect to be invited to my wedding. They still haven't apologized, but somehow think they deserve to show up on one of the most important days of my life. Lisa and I laughed reading their messages because they were so delusional it almost seemed like a bad joke. But in truth, the whole thing is more sad than funny.
Update 2. Hannah showed up at my house again, even after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was getting ready to leave for work, but she stopped me by flopping onto the hood of my car, refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was incredibly annoying, and this time I actually called the police. They took her away while she screamed and cried, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Unfortunately for her, nobody bought it. It took some time to file the official report against her, but as soon as I did, I rushed to work so this incident wouldn't ruin my day. I figured my parents would bail her out since she's their favorite, and I was right. They sent her home and then followed up with a long message telling me I had been too harsh and unfair to them over a mistake they supposedly made almost 10 years ago. It was laughable. Nothing my sister and parents did to me back then could ever be called merciful or fair. No mercy stopped them from literally throwing me out of the house with nowhere to go. So now, I see no reason to offer forgiveness or kindness. I messaged my parents saying that after all these years, they had lost any right to tell me what I can or cannot do, and that they should stop deluding themselves. I haven't blocked them yet, had to check the message first, but I will soon. Hopefully then, I can finally cut that whole family out of my life for good. Update 3. I just got home from work, checked my socials, and saw that my parents sent me another long message. Lisa and I read it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. These poor people don't realize that nothing they say or do now can hurt me. I just laughed at how pathetic they are. They still think we're a family and announced they'd taken Hannah back, claiming both of their children deserve a second chance, as if I was ever in the wrong. They expected Lisa and me to visit them for dinner before my wedding to civilly resolve our differences. Too bold of them to assume I'd ever want them anywhere near my wedding. We laughed at their absurd message, and I responded that I had zero interest in any invitations from them. I'm perfectly happy living my life without them, just like I have for the last 7 years. They made it clear long ago that I'm better off without them. I'm grateful it took me so long to realize that. I no longer need them or their so-called forgiveness. They can continue playing happy family with Hannah all they want. I don't care. After sending that last message, I blocked them permanently. That's it. I'm done. I'm sure they'll try to contact me again somehow, but it doesn't matter. Lisa is the only family I need, and I'm happier than I've ever been with just her. My parents and sister never could see past their own noses, and I doubt they ever will. Next time they try to reach out, they'll be talking to my lawyer.
They want us to follow a dress code at school? Nope. I'll wear whatever I want. A little background for context. I've never been a fan of dress codes just for the sake of having them. So, when I got into a boarding school that didn't require uniforms, I was thrilled. Honestly, I don't even hate dress codes in principle. My problem is always with how people interpret them. For example, if the rules say socks should be black or blue, 99.9% of people will assume it means navy blue. I'm the kind of person who'll show up in sky blue socks just to prove a point. Not to make trouble, but simply to share a sly grin with the handful of people who think, well, it does just say blue. It's my way of reminding the bureaucrats who wrote the rules that they aren't as airtight as they think. As my husband likes to say, I've always been a bit of a pain in the neck. I enjoy showing that either or isn't the only option. I've always dressed boldly, loved unusual combinations of fabrics and colors, and if someone had encouraged me to learn sewing back then, I probably would have become a fashion designer. But boarding school is hardly a place full of vibrant creativity. Despite being spirited, I was never a troublemaker. My mom used to describe me as a polite, well-behaved kid who could bend rules into a pretzel without ever technically breaking them. She had to word her rules very carefully whenever she left me home alone, but she also had to be cautious not to give me new ideas in the process. If someone presented a rule as unbreakable, I just had to test it. And if they were pushy or smug about it, I'd find the cleverest way possible to prove them wrong. My mom always believed critical thinking was the real key to success in life. She taught me that if you can analyze a problem and figure out a solution, you don't need to have all the answers memorized. You just need to know how to find them. Remember, this was a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't fault modern parents for having a different mindset. Still, I'd raise my own kids with the same philosophy if I had them. She raised me to believe success comes to people who don't just answer apple when someone asks what that round red thing on the table is. Instead, you pick it up, study its weight and texture, notice the sheen on its wax, memorize its smell, because you never know when someone will ask you to describe the underside of an apple when there isn't one around. And when you grow up thinking that way, turning school dress codes inside out becomes kind of fun. So here's the actual story. At my boarding school, we had 2 dress codes. The first was called the class dress code, and that basically meant we were expected to look like young professionals. Pretty standard stuff, skirts below fingertip length for girls, shirts and ties for boys, and all the usual details. The second set was for downtime, called city dress. That was when we hung out in the student lounge or went off campus. It was more relaxed, but still had enough restrictions to prevent the girls from wearing anything too revealing, or the boys from dressing like slobs in ripped clothes. Now, I had these suede knee-high fringe boots. Actually, I had 2 pairs, one black and one brown. They were the warmest, most comfortable boots I'd ever owned, even before Uggs became a thing. My mom and I had fought over those boots for years, so it was a huge personal victory when she let me bring them to school. One day, a teacher pulled me aside and told me that the faculty had been discussing my boots and decided they didn't fit the class dress code. But I read the rules, I argued. There's nothing in there about boots like these. I know, she admitted. But we've decided they don't fit the image we want. But the color matches, I know. The material's fine too. Suede is allowed. Yes. The rules don't mention height. Riding boots are permitted, right? That's true.
So why then? I demanded. I honestly can't tell if I felt more angry or hurt. Probably both. This teacher was someone I respected, someone who had always been kind to me, and I immediately understood why they sent her to talk to me instead of someone else. Because I wasn't the type to throw a tantrum or cause a scene. I was the type to plan my revenge quietly. "All right then," I said calmly, and walked away. That night, I studied the dress code rules word for word, line by line. I read through every single sentence of that dress code over and over again. I even said the rules out loud, picked up every item of clothing listed, and examined it like I was some alien who only had this manual and a piece of fabric to figure out why humans wear these things. I had to admit, it was a strict code, but they made two big mistakes. First, nowhere did it say where each piece of clothing had to be worn. Second, there was no mention that you even had to look presentable. The rules only specified colors and lengths: skirts below fingertip length, socks above the ankle, sleeves covering elbows, and so on. Shoes had to be in muted tones: black, brown, or other earthy shades, like my fringe boots. But nowhere did it say you couldn't show up in, say, elf shoes. Of course, elf shoes wouldn't exactly scream professional, but still, loophole. I went to bed that night mad as hell, my head buzzing with mischievous ideas. I debated with myself for a long time whether I should even go through with it, but eventually I decided if I still felt the same way in the morning, I'd start phase 1. The next day, I woke up just as annoyed, and on my way to breakfast, I mentally made a list of the biggest clowns in my class. In the cafeteria, I found a couple of them and told them, "You know, the handbook is very specific about how ties must be knotted: Windsor, single, or double. And if it's a bow tie, it has to be tied in the classic way. But nowhere does it say ties have to be worn on the neck. The rule just says they must be properly tied." I suggested that they read it carefully that evening and decide for themselves what to do with that little loophole. The following day, ties were everywhere: on wrists, wrapped around glasses, tied across foreheads, looped around ankles, knees, thighs, even wrapped around fists like someone was stopping a nosebleed. If you could tie a Windsor knot on some body part, one of the boys in our school had done it. I was ridiculously proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were irritated, of course, though plenty of students found it hilarious, until math class. One boy came in without a visible tie. He was the one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher looked down at him sternly and said, "I know you all decided to play games with ties today. I think we've been patient enough, but you do know the rules say you have to be wearing one." He grinned, looked her in the eye, and replied, "I am wearing one. You just can't see it." The room erupted in laughter. Maybe he did tie it around his ankle under his pants, or around his elbow under the blazer. Who knows? But to the rest of us, he instantly became the guy who wore his tie on his junk. By the end of the day, I was considered the legend who had found a loophole, and he was the legend who took it to, well, the most infamous possible place. The very next morning, the school email newsletter had an announcement. The rules had been updated. Ties must now be worn on the neck only. Fun times were officially over. But phase 2, oh, that was the real challenge. I'd been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I'd ever seen at the mall. They were silver, with holographic rainbow circles all over, had a 5-centimeter platform, a 10-centimeter heel, and lace-up fronts that came just above the ankle. Utterly outrageous. I knew there was no way I could get away with them to class, but for city dress, I wanted them so badly. After 9 years of uniforms, I was finally starting to enjoy fashion. I'd been saving money for months and would sneak into that store whenever I could, just to look at them. For a while, I tried to convince myself they were too expensive, but once they banned my favorite suede fringe boots, my desire for those wild rainbow boots only grew stronger. Eventually, I scraped together enough money. It felt like fate. That weekend, I practically skipped to the mall, grinning from ear to ear, only to find they were sold out in my size. I nearly burst into tears, but then, right next to them, I saw the same design in black patent leather. Until that moment, I dismissed the black pair as boring, especially compared to the silver ones. But here's the thing. Our dress code had an entire paragraph about patent leather shoes. They were allowed, but only if worn with pants. Why? Because of that absurd old belief that shiny shoes could reflect a girl's underwear if she wore a skirt. So my rainbow boots, absolutely banned. But their black patent leather sisters with silver accents, perfectly legal. Silver detailing was allowed, since shoelace eyelets could be made of metal. And the 5-centimeter platform and 10-centimeter heel, also fine. There wasn't even a height restriction for heels in the dress code. I guess the school assumed no high school girl would willingly spend an entire day in stilettos.
And unlike the shiny rainbow boots, their black patent leather version looked less like party footwear and more like ankle boots a pixie would wear. Funny thing is, I never would have even glanced at those black boots if it weren't for my newly discovered obsession with the dress code. The outfit started with these bright orange polyester pants covered in tiny gray-green amorphous specks, something that vaguely resembled a microscopic giraffe print. The green was barely visible. From a distance, it just looked like some random texture over the orange. The clash between the two colors was so aggressive that the pattern literally seemed to vibrate, making you dizzy and even a little nauseous if you stared too long. By sheer luck, I had also managed to grab an orange terry sweater in exactly the same shade. The result? From the waist up, I looked like a rejected Sesame Street character, while from the waist down, I resembled a disco-era misfit. Did I mention the pants were slightly flared? So on Monday, I walked into class looking like someone who'd been thrown off the set of Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had these heavy wooden heels that clumped so loudly they echoed through the entire building. Suddenly I was towering a good 10 centimeters over everyone else, more noticeable in the hallways, and even rivaling some teachers in terms of sheer presence. I caught a few of them throwing sideways glances at my boots, and I started keeping mental notes on which staff members apparently had it out for my suede knee-highs. It was obvious who found my appearance ridiculous. But I didn't stop there. It turned into a personal mission to curate the most hideous outfits my imagination could come up with. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I just wanted to make sure every piece still technically complied with the dress code. Even the teachers admitted my boots met the written requirements, they just didn't like them. I'd put effort into following their rules, and suddenly it wasn't good enough, simply because my choices weren't to their taste. So fine, if they didn't like my boots, I'd wear ugly boots every single day, forcing them to stare at outfits that nobody in their right mind would find appealing. And what could they do? Tell me daily that my clothes were wrong while failing to explain how? By their own admission, nothing I wore actually broke the rules, and I wasn't about to start breaking them. That's not my style. Living in a dorm had its perks. Girls shared clothes freely, so as long as you were willing to lend your stuff too, you essentially had access to 30 wardrobes, just in our block alone. My own clothes had been carefully coordinated, but once you started mixing them with other people's, the results became gloriously absurd. Like when my roommate's loud neon blouse, which she only ever wore with a black skirt, ended up paired with another girl's skirt in a clashing wild print. I wore it specifically because the colors screamed at each other. Still, not against the rules. Those scandalous slut boots, I only ever paired them with pants. I raided every thrift store, vintage shop, and secondhand place in town. And since our city had no shortage of hippies, the selection was fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with ties that made me look so boyish that at a parent-teacher meeting, one of the teachers actually asked my mom if I was... Apparently dressing badly meant you were automatically gay. I'd braid my bangs into a thin plait, clip a heavy earring to the end so it dangled, and then swing it back and forth over my desk, or book, but only during the lessons of the teachers I suspected of discriminating against my boots. Basically, I did everything I could to annoy them with my appearance. At that infamous parent-teacher conference, they asked my mom to talk to me about my clothes. She blinked and asked if I was breaking any rules. They explained the boot situation. My mom laughed and told them there was nothing they could do. If there's one thing her daughter hated, it was being punished for a rule she didn't know existed. Or worse, one that had never even been written down. If you want to make a new rule right now to stop her, go ahead, Mom said. By tomorrow, she won't be doing this anymore. I promise you won't see those boots again. But the way she'll see it, you've taken away something she liked for no good reason. That's punishment, whether you call it that or not. And when she feels punished unfairly, she punishes back. Simple as that. My advice? Drop it and spend the summer rewriting your handbook. Otherwise, you'll burn through paper trying to keep up with all the loopholes she's going to find. My daughter lives for finding loopholes. Honestly, I regret giving her so many puzzle books when she was little. Hearing this, the teachers admitted the only real reason they were ignoring my new boots was this. When the teachers saw how I reacted to the suede boots ban, some of them honestly seemed afraid to imagine what I might show up in next if they tried to outlaw the second pair as well. But being the well-behaved student that I actually was, I never wore those suede boots again. And after that, no one ever gave me grief about my outfits. Well, except for one time when my skirt ended up way too short. That one wasn't even intentional. The following year, I didn't return to that school, but for completely unrelated reasons, so I never found out if they rewrote any of their rules. To this day, though, I've kept those black boots. They're still tucked away somewhere, and every time I stumble across them at the bottom of a box, I can't help but smile. I even held onto a t-shirt from that era. It is without exaggeration the single ugliest piece of clothing I own, but I just can't throw it out. Every time I see it in my closet, I start laughing, remembering the whole saga. Somewhere I've even got photos of me in that ridiculous fuzzy orange getup. If I ever dig them out, I'll definitely share them. Back then, I was having the time of my life breaking their so-called dress code, and it felt amazing. So, here's the takeaway. Whatever problems you're facing, try flipping them inside out. Look at them from a different angle, twist them around, play with them. You never know where the cracks might be hiding. And of course, this is also just another wonderful story about how amazing my mom was. She always had my back. Though if I'm honest, I suspect she was also quietly angry that the teachers hated our boots. Because if the school rules had been clearly written, she could have been wearing them all along. Instead, those awesome boots just sat gathering dust in my locker. I miss you, Mom. Edit. No, I didn't end up becoming a lawyer. Life just went in a different direction. These days I work for myself, building a business in a field I'm genuinely passionate about. I enjoy almost every minute of it. I'm happy, and I'm grateful that I get to love what I do. One last note. This whole story took place in the mid-90s.
My ex-wife is trying to win me back by using our daughters. Doesn't sound too serious at first, right? Yeah, it's what I thought too. But as much as I'd love to tell my ex to go to hell and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and joint custody. So completely cutting her out of my life just isn't possible. Not unless I walk away from my kids too, which I'd never do. We got married young, 20 years old, dating for 3 years before that. Our daughters were born during the first year of marriage. After the second birth, my ex had complications that made it difficult for her to get pregnant again. I didn't care. I was just grateful she made it through safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls to love. The marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she cheated. I have 0 tolerance for betrayal. I refuse to make myself miserable for something I didn't cause. Maybe it sounds strange, but my love for her died the exact moment I learned about her affair in detail. So no, this isn't some story about a man who can't let go. I moved on 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her. I just don't care. Whatever happens in her life means nothing to me, unless it directly affects our kids. The problem is, I seem to be the only one who's actually moved on. My ex, her family, and even our daughters keep trying to push us back together, even though I've made it crystal clear that I have absolutely no desire to ever be with her again. Maybe the fact that I stayed single for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I just wasn't ready to jump into anything new. My daughters were my top priority. Plus, I had my own emotional mess to sort through after her betrayal, which, thankfully, I managed with help from friends, family, and therapy. My relationship with my daughters is great. We don't fight,
We don't yell, and they're not rebellious or dramatic. Everything's been peaceful, except for one issue. They know their mother cheated. She told them herself about 3 years ago. Since then, I think she's been feeding them her version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop. It doesn't help anyone, least of all the girls. But instead of stopping, she just got sneakier about it. Since the divorce, she hasn't dated anyone, or even tried. I guess she thinks that makes her look noble. But honestly, I find it insulting. She could cheat on me while we were married, but now she's suddenly living like a saint? Whatever. That's her problem, not mine. For years, I could ignore the little comments my daughters made about their mom. How good she looks now, how happy she seems, the photos she just happened to show them where she's clearly dressed up to impress. But lately, things have gotten worse. Why? Because I started seeing someone. Clemence isn't the first woman I've dated since the divorce, but this is by far the most serious relationship I've had since it ended. She's 8 years older than me. We actually knew each other for about 4 years before anything romantic happened. We shared a hobby, became close friends, and eventually realized there was more between us. And yes, I genuinely love her. It even surprised me when I realized it. I honestly thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again the way I once did. At first, my daughters didn't know much about Clemence. Just like my previous relationships, I kept things private. But eventually, they started coming home earlier than expected and began seeing her around. Nothing inappropriate ever happened, but soon came the sighs, the cold looks, and the questions. What is she doing here? Don't you think it's unfair to Mom? It was like they thought I was dating just to spite their mother. I sat them down for a serious talk, explained everything over and over, but it just didn't sink in. They're still clinging to some childish fantasy where their parents get back together. Clemence, thankfully, is incredibly understanding. She doesn't take it personally and keeps saying, give them time. But honestly, I'm not convinced time will fix this. It hasn't yet, so why would it now? I've run out of ideas. That's why I'm asking for advice. Is there any way, any possible approach to help my daughters finally understand that I will never get back with their mother?
Sounds harmless enough, right? Well, not really. As much as I'd love to tell my ex to get lost and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and have joint custody. So, cutting her out of my life completely isn't an option. Unless I'm willing to lose my kids too. We got married young, both 20, after dating for 3 years. Our twin girls were born during the first year of marriage. My ex had some complications after that, which made future pregnancies difficult. At the time, I didn't care about that at all. I was just grateful she survived everything safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls we adored. Our marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she had cheated. I have zero tolerance for that kind of betrayal, and saw no reason to keep suffering for something that wasn't my fault. Some might find it strange, but every ounce of love I had for her died the moment I learned the full story of her affair. So no, this isn't some sad tale about a man who can't move on. I did, 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her anymore. I just couldn't care less what happens in her life as long as it doesn't affect our daughters. The real problem is that I'm the only one who truly moved on. My ex, her family, and even our daughters keep trying to reunite us, despite me being very clear that I have zero interest in ever being with her again. Maybe the fact that I didn't date anyone for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I wasn't about to jump into another relationship that fast, especially when I had 2 girls to raise. They were my priority. Eventually, with the help of friends, family, and therapy, I got my mental health back on track. My relationship with my daughters has always been great. No fights, no yelling, no teenage rebellion, yet they're smart, kind, and we've always been close. But there's one big problem. They know their mother cheated on me because she told them about 3 years ago. Since then, I'm pretty sure she's been feeding them a twisted version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop dragging them into our adult mess, but she doesn't listen.
She hasn't dated anyone since the divorce. Hasn't even slept with anyone, apparently. She thinks that makes her look noble. Personally, I find it insulting. When we were married, she was sleeping with someone else, and now she suddenly can live without intimacy for 7 years? Whatever, that's her problem. For years, I brushed off the occasional mentions of her looks or the photos my daughter showed me where she clearly dressed up just to make an impression. But things changed after I started dating again. My girlfriend Clemence isn't my first relationship since the divorce, but she's definitely the most serious one. She's 8 years younger than me, and we'd known each other for 4 years before we started dating. It grew naturally, from friendship into something deeper. And honestly, I love her. I didn't expect that. I thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again. Turns out I was wrong. At first, my daughters didn't know much about my relationship with Clemence. Then they started showing up at my house earlier than scheduled, sometimes finding her there. We were never inappropriate, just living our normal lives. But soon came the questions, what is she doing here? Or, that's not fair to Mom. It's like they genuinely believe I'm seeing someone just to hurt their mother. I've had long, honest talks with them, but they just don't seem to get it. They can't let go of the fantasy that their parents might reunite someday. Thankfully, Clemence is understanding. She says the girls just need time, though I'm not sure that will help. It hasn't so far. So yeah, I came online looking for advice. Maybe someone out there knows how to help my daughters finally understand that no matter what happens, I'm never going back to their mother. When I try explaining that you can't be faithful to someone you're no longer with, they just ignore it. I've begged my ex countless times to stop manipulating the girls and keep them out of our adult issues, but she doesn't care. At one point, I even considered going to court to get full custody, but was advised it probably backfired. The truth is, my daughters know why we divorced. They know their mother cheated. I usually don't recommend telling kids something like that, but mine are old enough now. The problem is that their understanding of the story is based entirely on her version, filled with excuses and self-pity. A year ago, I finally tried explaining my side, only to find out she had already told them years before, when they were around 13. They know what she did, but they can't comprehend it emotionally. To them, their mother has always been loving and caring. They can't imagine her cold and distant like she was during the affair. Back then, she completely shut me out, not just physically, but emotionally. She stopped doing little things, morning kisses before work, random hugs, shared jokes, all gone. I realized something was off and eventually, with a close friend's help, uncovered the truth. She had been giving all that affection to someone else. I'll never forgive that. My daughters don't understand why, and honestly, I don't want them to. No child should ever have to carry that kind of pain. So when they talk about regret, forgiveness, or getting back together, I just can't relate. Where was all that love when it mattered? Update. It's been a while since my original post. A lot has changed. My daughters actually found that post by accident. I had no idea they were even on that site. One day, I came home from work and found them both in tears. They ran to me, hugged me, and begged me to forgive them. Apparently, they'd read one of my comments and learned the full extent of their mother's affair and how deeply it hurt me back then. We went through a lot of therapy together. Honestly, I never blamed them. They were just kids, manipulated by their mother, who used their love as a weapon. After a few months of family therapy, the psychologist told us we no longer needed weekly sessions, just occasional check-ins. My daughters and I became closer than ever. Their relationship with their mom, though, took a hit, understandably. I told them not to dwell on her mistakes. I've long since made peace with what she did. That's also something we worked through in therapy. I eventually had a serious talk with my ex, made it absolutely clear that the getting back together nonsense needed to stop. Whether she listened or not, I don't know, but at least she stopped bothering the girls with it. Or maybe they've learned to tune her out. Either way, as long as my daughters are okay, I don't care what she's doing. As things settled, Clemence and my daughter started bonding, really bonding. They started talking to her more,
even asking her for advice on girl stuff. The first time I saw that, I nearly cried. Not long after, Clements and the girls surprised me. They organized a private dinner, just the three of us. Then Clements proposed to me. Yeah, she beat me to it. I was stunned, but happier than I had been in years. Not just because of her proposal, but because my daughters helped her plan it. We had a small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family, and now we're expecting a baby. My daughters can't wait to become big sisters, and I honestly can't wait to watch them spoil their new sibling rotten.
My ex-wife is trying to win me back by using our daughters. Doesn't sound too serious at first, right? Yeah, it's what I thought too. But as much as I'd love to tell my ex to go to hell and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and joint custody. So completely cutting her out of my life just isn't possible, not unless I walk away from my kids too, which I'd never do. We got married young, 20 years old, dating for 3 years before that. Our daughters were born during the first year of marriage. After the second birth, my ex had complications that made it difficult for her to get pregnant again. I didn't care. I was just grateful she made it through safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls to love. The marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she cheated. I have 0 tolerance for betrayal. I refuse to make myself miserable for something I didn't cause. Maybe it sounds strange, but my love for her died the exact moment I learned about her affair in detail. So no, this isn't some story about a man who can't let go. I moved on 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her. I just don't care. Whatever happens in her life means nothing to me, unless it directly affects our kids. The problem is, I seem to be the only one who's actually moved on. My ex, her family, and even our daughters keep trying to push us back together, even though I've made it crystal clear that I have absolutely no desire to ever be with her again. Maybe the fact that I stayed single for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I just wasn't ready to jump into anything new. My daughters were my top priority. Plus, I had my own emotional mess to sort through after her betrayal, which, thankfully, I managed with help from friends, family, and therapy. My relationship with my daughters is great. We don't fight, we don't yell, and they're not rebellious or dramatic. Everything's been peaceful, except for one issue. They know their mother cheated. She told them herself about 3 years ago. Since then, I think she's been feeding them her version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop. It doesn't help anyone, least of all the girls. But instead of stopping, she just got sneakier about it. Since the divorce, she hasn't dated anyone, or even tried. I guess she thinks that makes her look noble. But honestly, I find it insulting. She could cheat on me while we were married, but now she's suddenly living like a saint? Whatever. That's her problem, not mine. For years, I could ignore the little comments my daughters made about their mom. How good she looks now, how happy she seems, the photos she just happened to show them where she's clearly dressed up to impress. But lately, things have gotten worse. Why? Because I started seeing someone. Clemence isn't the first woman I've dated since the divorce, but this is by far the most serious relationship I've had since it ended. She's 8 years older than me. We actually knew each other for about 4 years before anything romantic happened. We shared a hobby, became close friends, and eventually realized there was more between us. And yes, I genuinely love her. It even surprised me when I realized it. I honestly thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again the way I once did. At first, my daughters didn't know much about Clemence. Just like my previous relationships, I kept things private. But eventually, they started coming home earlier than expected and began seeing her around. Nothing inappropriate ever happened, but soon came the sighs, the cold looks, and the questions. What is she doing here? Don't you think it's unfair to Mom? It was like they thought I was dating just to spite their mother. I sat them down for a serious talk, explained everything over and over,
but it just didn't sink in. They're still clinging to some childish fantasy where their parents get back together. Clemence, thankfully, is incredibly understanding. She doesn't take it personally and keeps saying give them time. But honestly, I'm not convinced time will fix this. It hasn't yet, so why would it now? I've run out of ideas. That's why I'm asking for advice. Is there any way, any possible approach to help my daughters finally understand that I will never get back with their mother?
Sounds harmless enough, right? Well, not really. As much as I'd love to tell my ex to get lost and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and have joint custody. So, cutting her out of my life completely isn't an option, unless I'm willing to lose my kids too. We got married young, both 20, after dating for 3 years. Our twin girls were born during the first year of marriage. My ex had some complications after that, which made future pregnancies difficult. At the time, I didn't care about that at all. I was just grateful she survived everything safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls we adored. Our marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she had cheated. I have zero tolerance for that kind of betrayal, and saw no reason to keep suffering for something that wasn't my fault. Some might find it strange, but every ounce of love I had for her died the moment I learned the full story of her affair. So no, this isn't some sad tale about a man who can't move on. I did, 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her anymore. I just couldn't care less what happens in her life as long as it doesn't affect our daughters. The real problem is that I'm the only one who truly moved on. My ex, her family, and even our daughters keep trying to reunite us, despite me being very clear that I have zero interest in ever being with her again. Maybe the fact that I didn't date anyone for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I wasn't about to jump into another relationship that fast, especially when I had 2 girls to raise. They were my priority. Eventually, with the help of friends, family, and therapy, I got my mental health back on track. My relationship with my daughters has always been great. No fights, no yelling, no teenage rebellion, yet they're smart, kind, and we've always been close. But there's one big problem. They know their mother cheated on me because she told them about 3 years ago. Since then, I'm pretty sure she's been feeding them a twisted version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop dragging them into our adult mess, but she doesn't listen. She hasn't dated anyone since the divorce, hasn't even slept with anyone apparently. She thinks that makes her look noble. Personally, I find it insulting. When we were married, she was sleeping with someone else, and now she suddenly can live without intimacy for 7 years? Whatever, that's her problem. For years, I brushed off the occasional mentions of her looks or the photos my daughter showed me where she clearly dressed up just to make an impression. But things changed after I started dating again. My girlfriend Clemence isn't my first relationship since the divorce, but she's definitely the most serious one. She's 8 years younger than me, and we'd known each other for 4 years before we started dating. It grew naturally, from friendship into something deeper. And honestly, I love her. I didn't expect that. I thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again. Turns out I was wrong. At first, my daughters didn't know much about my relationship with Clemence. Then they started showing up at my house earlier than scheduled, sometimes finding her there. We were never inappropriate, just living our normal lives. But soon came the questions, what is she doing here? Or, that's not fair to Mom. It's like they genuinely believe I'm seeing someone just to hurt their mother. I've had long, honest talks with them, but they just don't seem to get it. They can't let go of the fantasy that their parents might reunite someday. Thankfully, Clemence is understanding. She says the girls just need time, though I'm not sure that will help. It hasn't so far. So yeah, I came online looking for advice. Maybe someone out there knows how to help my daughters finally understand that no matter what happens, I'm never going back to their mother. When I try explaining that you can't be faithful to someone you're no longer with, they just ignore it. I've begged my ex countless times to stop manipulating the girls and keep them out of our adult issues, but she doesn't care. At one point, I even considered going to court to get full custody,
but was advised it probably backfired. The truth is, my daughters know why we divorced. They know their mother cheated. I usually don't recommend telling kids something like that, but mine are old enough now. The problem is that their understanding of the story is based entirely on her version, filled with excuses and self-pity. A year ago, I finally tried explaining my side, only to find out she had already told them years before, when they were around 13. They know what she did, but they can't comprehend it emotionally. To them, their mother has always been loving and caring. They can't imagine her cold and distant like she was during the affair. Back then, she completely shut me out, not just physically, but emotionally. She stopped doing little things, morning kisses before work, random hugs, shared jokes, all gone. I realized something was off and eventually, with a close friend's help, uncovered the truth. She had been giving all that affection to someone else. I'll never forgive that. My daughters don't understand why, and honestly, I don't want them to. No child should ever have to carry that kind of pain. So when they talk about regret, forgiveness, or getting back together, I just can't relate. Where was all that love when it mattered? Update. It's been a while since my original post. A lot has changed. My daughters actually found that post by accident. I had no idea they were even on that site. One day, I came home from work and found them both in tears. They ran to me, hugged me, and begged me to forgive them. Apparently, they'd read one of my comments and learned the full extent of their mother's affair and how deeply it hurt me back then. We went through a lot of therapy together. Honestly, I never blamed them. They were just kids, manipulated by their mother, who used their love as a weapon. After a few months of family therapy, the psychologist told us we no longer needed weekly sessions, just occasional check-ins. My daughters and I became closer than ever. Their relationship with their mom, though, took a hit, understandably. I told them not to dwell on her mistakes. I've long since made peace with what she did. That's also something we worked through in therapy. I eventually had a serious talk with my ex, made it absolutely clear that the getting back together nonsense needed to stop. Whether she listened or not, I don't know, but at least she stopped bothering the girls with it. Or maybe they've learned to tune her out. Either way, as long as my daughters are okay, I don't care what she's doing. As things settled, Clements and my daughter started bonding, really bonding. They started talking to her more, even asking her for advice on girl stuff. The first time I saw that, I nearly cried. Not long after, Clements and the girls surprised me. They organized a private dinner, just the three of us. Then Clements proposed to me. Yeah, she beat me to it. I was stunned, but happier than I had been in years. Not just because of her proposal, but because my daughters helped her plan it. We had a small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family, and now we're expecting a baby. My daughters can't wait to become big sisters, and I honestly can't wait to watch them spoil their new sibling rotten.
I nearly lost $900,000 during my divorce, but instead, I destroyed my cheating wife in court with shocking evidence. I work as an elementary school teacher, so my daily routine is very predictable. I have fixed hours at school, and every Tuesday we usually had staff meetings that ended around 6 p.m. That meant I normally got home by 7. My wife, Terry, whom I had been married to for over 30 years, would go to the gym every Tuesday evening. She always came back exhausted, so I usually prepared dinner while she showered and handled the house chores. But one day, my principal surprised us by canceling the meeting. It was only 3:30 p.m., and I thought it would be a great idea to head home early, cook dinner, and maybe catch up on some household tasks. Lately, I'd noticed Terry becoming more distant, and I hoped a candle at dinner might help rekindle some spark between us. Our marriage had been strained by financial troubles, and I could feel her pulling away more and more. She wanted to control everything, and if things didn't go her way, she would become stubborn and irritable. I always thought of myself as patient, but it was starting to wear me down.
When I got home, I noticed her car in the garage. That was strange, because she usually took the bus to the gym. I slipped in quietly through the back door. The first thing I saw was her purse sitting on the kitchen counter. Terry was always meticulous about where she placed her things, so this was odd. Then I noticed her workout clothes and a large towel on the floor. Just as confusion set in, I heard noises coming from upstairs. My first thought was that she might not be feeling well, so I cautiously started up the stairs. That's when I stumbled over a pair of men's shoes. Scattered on the steps were pants, a shirt, socks, and worst of all, Terry's lingerie, the kind she only wore for anniversaries or special nights. My blood ran cold. I froze on the stairs, heart pounding, stomach turning. For a moment, I thought I might faint. I sat down, trembling. Then anger began to boil inside me, an emotion I rarely allowed to take control. Years of teaching had given me patience, but this was beyond anything I could manage. I moved quietly toward the bedroom. To reach it, you had to pass through the walk-in closet. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And there it was, my wife, my partner of 3 decades, the mother of our children, betraying me in our own bed. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I knew I would need proof, not just for myself, but for the storm that was about to follow. Watching it unfold before my eyes was like living through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Terry, the woman who claimed to love me, who volunteered at charities, who acted like the perfect wife, was now just another liar. I couldn't watch anymore. I stopped recording, slipped out of the house, and just walked aimlessly. Eventually, I ended up in a park miles away. I sat on a bench, splashed some water on my face, and played the video back. The sound was low, so nearby kids wouldn't hear, but on that screen was the collapse of my marriage, my family, my entire life. And there in the park, I broke down and cried. By the time I got back home, it was around 7 p.m., my usual return time on meeting days. Terry greeted me at the back door with fake concern. "Do you want me to get you something to drink?" Her eyes were full of feigned worry, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. My voice shook as I muttered, "Not really. I think it's just my stomach. I'm going to take a shower and sleep it off." "All right, but take a bucket in case you throw up. I don't want to ruin the clean sheets," she said casually. That almost broke me. Those clean sheets had already been ruined, stained by betrayal. I replied more firmly, "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." And that's exactly what I did. For the next few days, I pretended to be unwell. She went on with life as if nothing had happened, while I carried the weight of the recording in my pocket. The evidence that my marriage was nothing but ashes. When Monday came, I finally decided what to do next. I needed answers. Was this just a one-time betrayal, or had it been going on for a while? The next morning, I told the principal that I had to undergo an unexpected medical procedure and wouldn't be able to teach for a few days. A substitute was arranged, which gave me the freedom I needed. On Tuesday, I left home as usual, but parked several streets away, then walked back quietly, cutting through neighbors' yards. I knew all the back routes and moved carefully so no one would notice me. I slipped into our detached garage and changed into casual clothes and soft shoes to keep silent. Then came the waiting. I remembered that the last time I'd come home early, there hadn't been any strange cars parked outside. That meant her lover probably came on foot. I crouched behind the hedge and bushes near our front entrance, hidden but with a clear view of the door. Terry carried on her morning as if everything was normal. Washing dishes, starting the dishwasher, vacuuming, dusting. Around 11:30, She went upstairs. I heard the shower running, followed by the toilet flushing. After about 45 minutes, she came back down and left the front door slightly open, an unspoken invitation for her guest. It didn't take long. Around 12:30, he showed up. I didn't know who he was at first, but I managed to capture about 10 seconds of video on my phone. It showed his side profile and almost a clear shot of his face. He didn't hesitate, he just walked straight into my house. The first words I heard froze me in place. "I hope you're wearing that workout outfit again." "Of course," Terry replied with a giggle. "You always loved when I put it on. Sometimes I think that's what hooked you in the first place." That was all I needed. Their comfort with each other screamed of a long-term affair. They headed upstairs without a care in the world. I returned to the garage, my heart pounding out of my chest. My head was spinning with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And why hadn't she ever talked to me about anything? What terrified me more was the thought of my health. They hadn't used protection, at least not that I could see. The idea that she might have put me at risk made my stomach churn. I thought back to her years at the gym, the social circle of married women she had joined, and the charity events. Maybe the gym held the answers.
Update 1. Being a teacher came with one big advantage. I had access to printers and other resources. I decided to start by printing still frames from the video I'd taken. Identifying him was now my top priority. On Thursday, when Terry was supposed to go to the gym again, I suggested going with her. I claimed I was thinking about getting a membership myself, especially since school was on break. She immediately grew uncomfortable and tried to talk me out of it. "It's really just a group of wives who chat more than work out," she insisted, but I didn't budge. So that Thursday, I walked into the gym with her. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like a scene from an old Western. Everyone turned to stare at me, whispering among themselves. Terry was visibly on edge, sneaking nervous glances toward the staff area. I tried to distract myself by walking around the facility. It was the usual setup, rows of machines, mirrors on the walls. Near the exit, I noticed a staff board with photos and contact info. At the top was the owner and director, Miss Elizabeth West, followed by 2 women and 1 man. My blood went cold. The man was him, the lover. Under his photo, Philip Barnes, head of training programs, personal coach. As I memorized his number, I looked back toward the machines. Terry was gone. Panic struck me until I spotted her a few minutes later in a hushed but desperate conversation with none other than Philip. She stood partly hidden behind weight equipment, gesturing for him to leave. Then she quickly returned to her machine as if nothing had happened. She didn't realize I'd seen it all. I sat there burning with rage, trying to keep my composure. When she came back over, she noticed my pale face and asked softly, "Are you okay? Is your blood sugar still low?" "I'm fine now. Are you ready to leave?" Before she could answer, the director's voice echoed through the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, the last training session of the day is canceled. Mr. Barnes suddenly felt unwell and had to go home." A wave of disappointment swept through the women in the gym. But I wasn't disappointed. For me, it only confirmed everything. Update 2. It seemed that workouts with Mr. Bonte were a cornerstone for many women at that gym. That alone made me think this needed deeper investigation. When I glanced at Terry, she didn't show much reaction to the announcement of his sudden illness. But I could swear I saw her shoulders relax, as if a huge weight had been lifted. "Let's go," she said quickly, snatching her towel and gym bag from the storage area where everyone left their things during class. We were just stepping out when a woman approached us, someone I didn't immediately recognize. "Hello," she said nervously. "Sorry, I'm new to all this and lost track of time. My son Timothy's here, right?" That wasn't usual. New parents often struggled with pickup procedures.
I reassured her I'd get Timothy while colleagues covered the remaining kids. I found him near his classroom, chatting with another student. "Hey Tim, your mom's here. Let's head to the pickup area." He looked puzzled. He was in the last year of elementary school, old enough to not lose track of time. "That's weird," he muttered. "Mom's usually busy with her fitness instructor on Friday afternoons. Back at my old school, she often didn't come until 5:30. The word fitness instructor hit me like a hammer. My heart pounded as I casually asked, "Oh, that's great she takes care of her health. Do you happen to know his name?" "Yeah, it's Bonte or something like that. He works at the local gym but also does private lessons at home." That's who I want to be when I grow up. Mom always seems so happy and relaxed after training with him. We usually order takeout on Fridays because she doesn't have time to cook. I nearly lost my composure. This man wasn't just entangled with my wife, he was messing around with multiple women in town. Back at the car, his mother thanked me warmly for helping. "Not a problem," I said smoothly, "part of the job. By the way, I don't think we've officially met. I'm Gerard D. Kids just call me Mr. D." "Nice to meet you," she replied, shaking my hand. "I'm Mary Jones. I remember seeing you at the gym last Thursday. You were there with your wife, Terry. Sorry she seemed in such a hurry to leave. It looked like Mr. Bonte's absence threw everything off." The moment she said his name, her entire demeanor shifted. She paled, her hands trembled, and she stammered, Well, Mr. D, see you later," before practically fleeing the parking lot. That sealed it. Bonte wasn't just a trainer. He was a serial predator in our community.
Update 3. It was time to think about my future, and in that vision there was no Terry. Rage gave me clarity. I began reviewing all the small but crucial details of our shared life, the sort of things couples often overlook. Who pays which bills? Which insurance company do we use? When are utilities due? From which account do we make automatic payments? I discovered the mortgage had only a small balance left. My retirement account had grown to an impressive $900,000, thanks to mandatory contributions from our teachers' union. Our savings account, intended for an overseas vacation, held about $30,000. That trip was no longer on the table. My priority became draining it before Terry realized I knew about her betrayal. Quietly, I engineered a series of appliance breakdowns while she wasn't home. I'd unplug a cord, then claim a repairman had come to fix it, paying in cash. In reality, I pocketed the money and repaired it myself. Over time, I gathered nearly $20,000 this way. I also purchased tools and other necessities to prepare for what was coming. Update 4. I always paid cash for everything, showing the receipts to Terry, then secretly returning the items the next day. Dishonest? Absolutely. But honesty and trust had already been gutted from our marriage. Because of her actions, I was becoming a man I never thought I could be, a liar. Her Thursday daytime workouts with Bonte continued, and I no longer bothered even trying to initiate anything intimate with her. We coexisted like roommates. That was it. Quietly, I began boxing up my personal belongings, keeping them stored in the garage where Terry rarely went. Since her car usually sat outside, the garage was basically my territory, and she didn't notice my gradual disappearance. On the rare occasion she did ask about missing items, I told her they'd broken or that I didn't need them anymore. She accepted those answers mostly because many of my things didn't fit her preferred aesthetic anyway. When most of my possessions were gone and the house looked practically unchanged, I realized how much I had already surrendered to Terry's control over the years. I withdrew what I could from my retirement account and bought a small house on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, and a garage, but it was mine. Close to the school where I worked, and best of all, the mortgage was small enough that half my salary easily covered the payments. No mansion, no luxury, but solid. Amazing what you can find if you're willing to skip the glossy neighborhoods. I moved my belongings in piece by piece. Furniture wasn't a problem.
Secondhand shops and donation centers were full of cheap finds. Honestly, the place reflected my own state. Used, but still standing. It was time for everyone to get what they deserved. One afternoon at school pickup, Mary Jones came over to me again. Her son Timothy was playing nearby, but I immediately noticed she looked shaken, as if she had been crying. As a teacher, you get trained to read those signs. "Mr. D, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, her voice wavering. "Of course. Just park over there and meet me at the benches." I always joked that those benches near the pickup zone were my office. She parked, then joined me, while Timothy kicked a ball around. She hesitated, then finally began. "I don't know how much you know about what's been happening at the gym." I kept my face steady. "I know Terry, my wife, enjoys it there. Says it keeps her in shape." She bit her lip, clearly wrestling with herself, then blurted, "There are things you need to know." I cut to the chase. "Does this have to do with Philip Bonte?" Her expression hardened instantly. "You have no idea just how much it has to do with that pig." "I can imagine. But go on." Tears welled in her eyes. "He targets women at the gym. Regulars. He watches, waits, and then pounces." I asked how she knew. She looked away, ashamed. "Because I was one of them. Until last month. We met every Friday at 12:30. Her voice faltered as though reliving it.
She confessed how she had believed there could be a future with him. Divorced, lonely, missing intimacy, Bonte had filled a void, until suddenly another woman replaced her. He dropped her cold, with nothing but a half-hearted, "Sorry, can't anymore." She gave a bitter laugh through tears. "I thought I was special. Turns out I was just another notch." I sat stunned. How could she unload this on me, her child's teacher? She must have been truly desperate. Trying to offer some comfort, I murmured, "Relationships aren't always what they seem." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face. Then she whispered, "You already know, don't you? About him and Terry?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, I know." Mary reached for my arm. "Then please believe me, he'll keep doing this until someone stops him. He doesn't care who he hurts as long as his ego's fed. He even brags about it at bars with his buddies." Her tone sharpened. "If you need my help to make him pay, just say the word. That man deserves to be brought down." She called for Timothy and drove off, leaving me in silence. I sat there, mind racing. Oddly, I felt a flicker of relief. Her confession made my plan for revenge seem less like an act of a betrayed husband and more like a moral obligation. Bonte wasn't just wrecking my life. He was a predator preying on countless women. The question now was, how many more? I started piecing together his schedule. The gym was open every day except Mondays, and he seemed to be there constantly. Using the number listed at the gym, I tracked down his address. Just 3 blocks from our house. No wonder it was so easy for him to sneak over for sessions with my wife. I told Terry that my doctor had recommended daily evening walks around 5 p.m. Luckily, she showed no interest in joining me. That gave me the perfect cover. Since I knew it wouldn't interfere with her own meetings, everything went smoothly. During my first evening walk, I headed straight to Bonte's address and discovered that he lived in a ground-floor apartment among several similar buildings. His car wasn't there, so I lingered nearby to catch his return. He usually left our house well before 6 p.m., which meant he almost always came back around that time. Sure enough, at exactly 6 p.m., he walked into his apartment. It became a routine, day after day, whenever I was free to go out. On days I had staff meetings and couldn't leave, I assumed he still followed the same pattern. I began to suspect that his evenings at the gym weren't really about exercise, but about meeting different women. To confirm this, I adjusted my schedule, starting my walks earlier and watching his daily movements more closely. Eventually, I decided to take a full week off from work just to investigate. I went to an electronics store and purchased surveillance equipment, a long-range listening device, motion-triggered HD cameras with audio, and an external hard drive for storage. On Monday, after setting everything up, I installed the first camera inside Bonte's apartment. Luckily, his place was small, almost like a studio with a kitchenette and dining space. One camera was enough to cover the entire living area, except the bedroom. Breaking in was shockingly easy. He hid his keys under the doormat. Careless. All I had to do was wait for him to head to the gym, slip inside, place the camera, and leave. From then on, every sound or movement in his apartment was recorded and streamed straight to my laptop, time-stamped and secure. That same evening, I got my first footage, Bonte eating takeout in front of the TV before heading to bed at 9 p.m. The next day, I slipped into the gym through the back entrance after closing time and set up a second camera in a private room where clients were usually assessed. This was the same room Bonte often used for one-on-one sessions. By Wednesday, when Terry went out shopping, I had already installed the third and fourth cameras, one in our bedroom and another in the living room. Reviewing Tuesday's recordings shocked me, though deep down I wasn't surprised. Bonte woke up, went out for breakfast, then came back and made a phone call. "Julie, hey, it's me. He's gone. See you at 12:30. Where what I told you. Don't worry, I'll be careful. No one will see me come over. You said he's out for 3 days? Perfect. I'll come Thursday and Friday, too. We'll talk later. Love you." He hung up with a spring in his step, practically glowing. On Thursday, I set up in the garage with my laptop, waiting. As expected, the camera caught him returning with breakfast again, then calling Terry. She answered. "Good thing my husband left for work. See you at 12:30, like always." That was the breaking point. Later, I asked Mary, Terry's mother, to help me compile a list of all the women Bonte had been involved with in the past. She attacked the task with energy, and within a week, I had names and addresses. To my horror, Terry's name was on that list too. At this point, our house meant nothing to me. It wasn't a home anymore, just a building. Terry noticed the emptiness, but I brushed it off by saying I was reorganizing my things. Meanwhile, I secretly prepared for the end. I met with a divorce attorney, set up new bank accounts and insurance under my name only, moved our vacation savings to my private account, and switched to a new SIM card. I even changed the beneficiaries of my retirement plan to our children. I gathered all the evidence, surveillance footage, phone transcripts, photographs. I placed it all in folders, along with the names and contact details of the women Bonte had been with. I even included the address of a local clinic for STD testing, since most of his affairs were unprotected. On our kitchen table, I left divorce papers, DVDs of their encounters, printed stills, and my wedding ring, cut in half and smeared with grime. Beside it was a note. "Terry, this ruined ring is what's left of our marriage. Do not contact me. If you must, do it through the attorney listed in the documents. I've requested a restraining order at the school, so do not come there. Any disturbance will result in immediate police intervention. Our children know the truth, so don't expect to rewrite the story." Then I left. In the weeks that followed, everything fell apart for them. Word of the scandal spread quickly. The gym owner was forced to shut down and leave town. Bonte was later found beaten in an alley downtown. Divorce filings surged in our area, and several houses went up for sale. Terry came home that day, found my farewell package, and fainted on the spot. A neighbor called an ambulance. She later tried to contact me, but I ignored every attempt. Eventually, she even stormed the school, which ended in her arrest. After that, her efforts stopped. Our children didn't hold back. They confronted her openly, disgusted by her betrayal. Thankfully, they had inherited stronger values from me, not her. The divorce went through, and financial matters were settled. Terry had to sell the house and move into a smaller place on the outskirts of town. By then, she was known around the community as the gym slut. Every time she went out, whispers and mocking glances followed. Shame and depression eventually pushed her into psychiatric care. As for me, I kept teaching, rebuilt my life, and now live peacefully in my new home. I threw out my pregnant sister-in-law's food. My brother and his wife, Laura, who's 7 months pregnant, have been staying with us for about a week while he interviews for a job in our city. My kids adore having their aunt and uncle around, and everything had been going smoothly. Yesterday, Laura went grocery shopping and came back with several bags. I thanked her, but told her it really wasn't necessary. Our kitchen is already stocked, and their company is more than enough. She said she wanted to buy food herself, and most of the items were things she was seriously craving. As I helped her unpack, I noticed almost everything contained peanuts. Cookies, crackers, peanut butter, even some kind of peanut-filled cake. My stomach dropped, because she knows my 8-year-old son has a severe peanut allergy. We don't keep anything with peanuts in the house. When he was younger, we had a medical emergency that nearly cost his life. Ever since then, peanuts are a hard no. I tried not to be rude, but I told her I wasn't comfortable having that stuff in my home. Laura insisted she'd be careful. She wouldn't eat it around him or the other kids. She'd clean up afterward, she promised. She said her pregnancy cravings were intense and she really needed these snacks. Look, I have 4 kids. I know pregnancy cravings can be weird. I personally never had any that extreme, but every woman is different. I explained everything to my son and told him not to touch her snacks or be near her when she ate them. Fine. Problem solved. Or so I thought. This morning, I went downstairs early to make breakfast. I opened the fridge and found strawberries covered in peanut butter sitting right on the shelf with no container. Next to them, an open jar of peanut butter with the lid barely hanging on, and a plate of cold, soggy peanut butter sandwiches because apparently she likes them that way. I was furious. I've read enough about airborne allergens to know this was not safe. I grabbed a trash bag and started dumping everything inside. Her food, our food, all of it. I didn't care. I planned to take the bag straight to a shelter and explain why I couldn't keep it. Laura walked in while I was still fuming and asked what I was doing. I didn't hide my anger. She immediately got defensive, saying I had no right to throw away her food, that her baby needed it, and that I was being cruel to a pregnant woman. I told her point blank that I didn't care. If she couldn't respect my rules or my child's safety, then her cravings were not my problem. My kid could die. She stormed upstairs, packed her things, came back down, grabbed the bag of food, and left in tears. My brother called about half an hour later during a break in his interview. He was upset with both of us, said everyone was overreacting and that our son was still perfectly fine. When my husband came home, I told him everything, and he immediately took my side. So, was I wrong? Before we move on to the update, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Honestly, I can understand both sides here. If I were the pregnant woman, I'd probably feel humiliated and confused too. Someone throwing away all the groceries I bought, including my own food, because of a few peanut butter snacks? I'd be annoyed. But I also fully understand the mom. You simply cannot risk your child's life just to satisfy someone else's cravings. The unborn baby doesn't need peanut butter. It's a craving, not a medical necessity. Looking at the situation logically, the mom was right to prioritize her son's safety. Severe allergies are no joke, and if airborne peanut particles are even a small possibility, she had to act. The pregnant woman showed a shocking level of carelessness. So what do you think? Whose side are you on? Update 1. As many commenters predicted, Laura immediately ran to my family to complain. To her credit, she didn't twist the story. She told it exactly as it happened. And my mother was furious. She called me out of breath like she'd sprinted a mile, right after giving Laura a long lecture and making sure my son was okay. I can only imagine what she said to her. Even my stepdad gave Laura one of his signature disapproving glares, the kind that could make a grown adult rethink their entire life. My brother came by later that evening to pick up his things. For some reason, Laura had only packed hers. He apologized for what happened and said he'd talk to her once she calmed down. According to him, she'd been crying non-stop ever since leaving my mom's place and now felt completely unwanted in our family. And of course, he blamed me for that. My husband stepped in and told him enough was enough, that Laura's feelings didn't outweigh what we had gone through and that she needed to stop acting like the victim. He pointed out that I'd been scrubbing the house from top to bottom for hours because of her stunt. Yes, I panicked a little and launched into a full deep clean, especially in the kitchen. My brother stormed out, saying we were impossible to reason with because we're both too stubborn. Now that I've calmed down, I do feel bad that Laura is hurt and feels unwelcome. That was never my intention. I'm actually considering apologizing, not for what I did, because I still believe I was right, but for how I reacted. I should never have agreed to let peanut products into the house in the first place, and I definitely could have handled the fridge situation more calmly.
Update 2. A lot of people asked for a continuation, so here it is. After my mom finished tearing into Laura and my brother yelled at me and my husband, I followed the advice many of you gave me and sent them both a long message. It came out messy and emotional, but I wrote about everything, how upsetting the situation was, how much their attitude hurt us, and that we were stepping back and limiting contact until we were ready to talk again. I sent the message the day after he grabbed his luggage and left. My brother left it on read without opening it, so I figured that was the end. But a couple days later, Laura called me. I hesitated, but curiosity won. At first she tried making small talk, but when she realized I wasn't in the mood, she got to the point. She apologized. She said she had no excuse other than blaming hormones and admitted she'd acted horribly. We ended up talking for a long time, and by the end of the conversation, I actually felt relieved, like maybe we could move past this. She also told me she still wanted us to come to her birthday. The celebration wouldn't be at a restaurant anymore. They spent more than expected on the hotel, just like everyone predicted, so she'd be hosting it at their house. I told her I'd discuss it with my husband. My brother later sent a message too, apologizing and saying he'd only been trying to defend her. My husband still felt it was too soon to reconcile, but he left the final decision to me, and honestly, I believed her apology. She had never behaved like that before, and she genuinely sounded embarrassed and remorseful. My sister, whom Laura also apologized to after my sister absolutely tore into her, and my parents were invited as well. But all the kids wanted to have a cousin sleepover instead of coming with us. After talking to my sister, we agreed that's what we'd do. Our usual babysitters are 16-year-old twin girls who live next door with their single mom. They're great, responsible, sweet, and have been helping us with the kids for over a year now, whenever my husband and I go on date nights. That matters for context. Since we were adding my sister's 2 kids to the group, I asked their mom if she could help the twins that evening. She agreed. So I called Laura and told her Richard and I would attend. When we arrived at their house, Laura met us at the door. We handed her the gift and stepped inside, but she looked a bit confused that the kids weren't with us. I reminded her that it was supposed to be an adults-only evening. The same thing happened when my sister and her husband showed up. Dinner was awkward. No matter how hard we tried to ease the tension, the conversation felt stiff. Still, I thought it was progress. Then Laura asked again why the kids hadn't come. She said she'd even cooked a special dish just for them. I hadn't mentioned the kids when confirming we'd attend, so I felt guilty, apologized, and thanked her for the thought. My sister jumped in and mentioned that the kids were having a cousin sleepover tonight, and she couldn't wait until our future nephew was old enough to join them. Laura smiled and said,
"Oh, I'm sure he'll be best friends with his cousins, my kids and your stepkids." That irritated me instantly. In our family, nobody uses words like step or half about the kids, but I held my tongue for the sake of peace. My sister technically is my stepsister. I mentioned my stepdad in my first post. I usually just call him by his name, but he's been a father figure since I was 10. My sister shot Laura an offended look, and my brother nudged his wife quietly with a face that clearly said, "What are you doing?" We ate in tense silence for a few minutes, barely keeping conversation alive, until Laura asked again about the kids, specifically who was watching them if all four parents were sitting at the table. I told her that our neighbors, the mom and the twin daughters, were babysitting tonight. Laura burst out laughing and joked that those girls and their mother must be so incompetent that all three of them could barely handle my kids. For context, I have 4 children. Maybe I'm biased, but they're well behaved, just a little too energetic sometimes for me, and I'm the one who gave birth to them. Add my sister's 2 kids on top of that, and it becomes too much for a pair of 16-year-old girls, even for just a couple of hours. We left at 7 p.m. and planned to be back by 11. It had nothing to do with the girls or their mom being bad babysitters. They're wonderful people, and my children adore them. Before I even opened my mouth, my own mother cut in. With a perfect smile, she said, "How sweet of you, Laura, to volunteer your expertise and babysit next time." Laura shut up. Dinner became even tenser after that. When we finished eating, Laura brought out dessert and my brother pulled a cake from the fridge. That's when I completely lost it. I stepped into the bathroom, and when I came back, I saw my husband holding my purse and practically dragging me out of the house. He looked furious. I was confused. Yes, dinner had been a disaster, but I still wanted to say goodbye and come up with a polite excuse. When he tried to physically push me outside, I knew something was very wrong. I pulled away from him and rushed back to the dining room. On the dessert table, the one Laura had proudly set, were peanut butter cupcakes, peanut butter pie, peanut butter cookies, peanut butter brownies, and the crown jewel, a peanut butter cake my brother had just carried in, staring at it in horror. Laura grinned and loudly announced to everyone, "It's my birthday. At least today I get to indulge myself. Help yourselves before she throws this out, too."
For a moment, I honestly thought my sister was going to attack her, and I can't say I was far from doing the same. All I could think about was how convinced Laura must be that my children would show up, and how she clearly planned this on purpose. I still felt guilty for allowing peanut products in that house the last time, and if my cousins hadn't been staying the night, my son could have been in deadly danger again. I snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I grabbed Laura by the head, turned her toward my brother, who looked too stunned to move, and shoved her face straight into the cake. I held her down while she flailed and said, "I hope you choke on your little indulgences," before letting go. Honestly, a part of me wanted to launch the pie at her as well, but I had already embarrassed myself enough. I told my brother I was done, with him, with his wife, with all of it. And if either of them tried contacting me or my family again, I'd file for a restraining order. My husband finally managed to get me out of the house. My sister followed with her husband while our parents stayed behind. I heard Laura screaming profanity after us, but my stepdad raised his voice, something he almost never does, and she went silent immediately. People joked in the comments of my first post about his death stare, but trust me, the man is usually calm as a stone. If he shows emotion, things have seriously gone off the rails. When we were kids, one frown from him was enough to make us understand we were in trouble. I haven't asked my mom what happened after. I can't handle another blow connected to my brother and his choices. I know this isn't the update anyone expected, but I'm done with both of them. My brother had to know. All of this happened under his roof. It breaks my heart that I won't see my nephew anymore.
that my kids won't meet the cousin they were excited about, but better to grieve that than to bury my son. Don't spare me harsh words. I'm 32. I shouldn't have been so naive. And yes, I know my reaction was wrong. I'm already talking to my therapist, trying to deal with the guilt. Please don't judge too hard. I'm still shaken. I'm also considering family therapy for my kids to help them process losing an uncle and aunt who used to be a big part of their lives. And now, we move on to the next story. Tell me in the comments, was the narrator right in the end or not? Maybe she shouldn't have snapped so badly that she shoved her sister-in-law's face into a cake. But honestly, a part of me just wants to say, well done. That was pretty much the ultimate payback she could have delivered.
I caught my girlfriend cheating with my closest friend, turned him over to the police, and cut all ties with her. My late wife, Rachel, and I grew up in a medium-sized town with around 30,000 people. We'd known each other since we were about 6 years old and were practically inseparable. By 16, we started dating, and when we turned 18, we moved a few hours away to pursue jobs. At 20, we got married and bought our first house. 2 years later, she became pregnant with our son. That's when tragedy struck. About 5 weeks before her maternity leave, a massive shelving unit at her workplace collapsed on her. I was told that she and our unborn baby were killed instantly. 2 of her coworkers were also caught in the accident. One was left paralyzed and the other lost a leg. The cruel reality was that her employer had chosen to keep using old, unsafe storage racks to save money instead of replacing them. To this day, I can't forgive the executives and managers responsible. They stole the love of my life and ended my child's future before it even began. Not long after, the company offered what they called a settlement. To me, it was nothing but blood money. They wanted to avoid a lawsuit, but I wanted justice. Thankfully, the case gained media attention, politicians got involved, and the trial was fast-tracked. Within 3 years, the payout was nearly 10 times what they initially tried to offer. Several executives were fired, fined, and some even ended up in prison. During this time, I continued working at my telecommunications job. My mother, God bless her, moved in with me to help. And honestly, I don't think I would have survived that period without her support. Around the same time, I was offered a promotion that required frequent travel across the state. Instead, I requested to be based out of my hometown branch so I could both cover statewide work and be close to my roots. They agreed. Eventually, I bought a house there, which allowed me to have my own space without constantly crashing at my parents' place whenever I came home. 4 years passed. One Friday, after returning from a work trip, I was catching up on tasks in my office when Harry, the branch director, stopped by. We had grown up in the same town, though at different schools, and after my return, we became close friends. He invited me to a party at his place that evening. It was last minute, but I agreed. I felt like I needed a night with friends. That night, Harry introduced me to Catherine, a new employee who had just relocated to the area. We clicked instantly. As cliché as it sounds, she reminded me so much of Rachel it was uncanny. 2 years of dating later, Catherine moved into my home. Everything was going well. She got along with my parents, Rachel's family approved of her, and for nearly a year, life felt normal again. Then things started to shift. Our video calls during my trips became shorter. Neighbors mentioned seeing a car, one that matched Harry's, parked behind my house when I was away. I even noticed clothing in the closet that wasn't mine. Every sign pointed to betrayal, but when I confronted her, Catherine insisted it was innocent. She claimed Harry occasionally stopped by to discuss work matters and never stayed the night. I convinced myself I was just paranoid and tried to move on, though deep down the doubt lingered. 6 months later, the truth hit me in the face. I had just closed a major deal and the negotiations wrapped up earlier than expected. Instead of staying out of town, I booked an earlier flight home, wanting to surprise Catherine. A few hours later, I arrived in my hometown.
Rather than pulling into the driveway, I parked in the alley behind the house, hoping to sneak in and give her a happy surprise. But part of me wanted to see if that mystery car was really there. And sure enough, it was. Parked directly at the back entrance was Harry's car. My stomach sank. For a split second, I hoped maybe it belonged to someone else, a careless neighbor perhaps, but the license plate confirmed it was his. My pulse skyrocketed as I stepped out, walking toward the rear of the house. And that's when I saw something that made my heart plummet. Time froze when I walked into my own kitchen and saw my closest friend having sex with my girlfriend on the counter. My mind went blank. 1,000 questions swirled inside me. Was this real? Was I dreaming? Why were they doing this in my house of all places? Shattered, I turned and slipped away unnoticed. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, tears running down my face. But grief quickly gave way to rage, the same kind of fury I once felt toward the people responsible for Rachel's death. Only this time, I had no intention of using violence. I considered myself a pacifist, but I knew I could still ruin their lives in a different way. I reversed down the alley, far enough to keep Harry's car in sight, then drove back near the front gate where I could watch the house. I called Catherine. They were still going at it when her phone rang. I watched them pause, glance at the screen, and exchange looks when they saw my name. She hesitated but didn't pick up. Seconds later, they resumed. I dialed again. This time, she answered. I hung up immediately. Moments later, she called me back, asking why I was ringing so late. I told her I'd be home in 10 minutes and didn't want to scare her by showing up unexpectedly. She faked excitement, said she was glad I was coming home, and quickly ended the call, claiming she needed to change clothes. Not long after, Harry bolted out the gate half-dressed, leapt into his car, and sped off like the devil was chasing him. I couldn't help but smirk, knowing I had terrified them both into thinking they'd been caught. I waited a few minutes, then parked where Harry's car had been. The rest of the night went quietly. Once she was asleep, I slipped into my office at the end of the hall, wide awake. I needed a plan. My mother had always taught me to let karma do its work, but this time, karma was going to get some help. I decided to punish them separately, but destroy both of their lives. I knew Harry was into substances, nothing hardcore, but enough to ruin his career if exposed. I'd stumbled upon some powder and weed at his place once, though he tried to cover it up. I pretended not to notice then, but now it was exactly what I needed. I began contacting shady clients and made several purchases, building up a stash over a few weeks. Soon I had more than enough to execute my plan. A month later, I hosted a barbecue for friends, Harry included. Once I made sure he had drunk plenty, I convinced him to crash at my place. Early the next morning, I planted the stash and some of my personal belongings inside his car, the largest amount hidden under the spare tire compartment. I also slipped a smaller stash into his home later when I dropped him off too drunk to drive himself. Days later, I staged a burglary. I smashed the glass in my kitchen's back door and left it ajar before heading to the airport. When my plane landed, I had several messages waiting. One from my panicked mother, who discovered the broken door and called the police, one from Catherine in tears, and one from local authorities asking me to return their call. I told the police I was away on business and would speak to them once I got back. In the meantime, I asked Catherine to stay at my parents' house until I returned, and arranged through my father to have a security company install cameras and an alarm system. When I came home, I acted the part, shocked, confused, and upset. How could this happen? Who would want to break into my home? After a police walkthrough confirmed missing personal items, I filed a report. The security rep then showed Catherine and me how the system worked. She nervously asked what to do if we wanted privacy while being intimate. He assured her it was a common question and showed how to disable cameras in certain areas. As I escorted him out, I asked him if he could also set up email alerts for whenever the cameras were switched off. He happily obliged. Perfect. All I had to do now was wait. Meanwhile, I quietly consulted a family lawyer. I needed to be absolutely certain that when the time came, I could legally walk away from Catherine without paying her a cent or splitting any property. Since I wasn't entirely sure whether Catherine and I could be considered common law partners, I wanted to make certain she'd never have a legal claim to anything that once belonged to Rachel and me. As Rachel's sole heir, the last thing I needed was a legal ambush. Thankfully, my lawyer assured me. Despite nearly 4 years of dating, Catherine and I hadn't lived together long enough to qualify as common law spouses. On top of that, since I paid all the bills and she had never contributed toward rent, she had no financial or legal grounds to demand anything. To cover every possibility, though, he drafted what felt like a bulletproof document just in case she ever tried. The following week, my company offered me a promotion with a relocation back to the city. It meant leading a team and, more importantly, no more endless travel. The move would take about 6 weeks, plenty of time to collect the evidence I needed.
Back in my hometown, I set the final stage of my plan in motion. I asked Harry to approve a week off for Catherine in about 2 weeks' time. I told him I wanted to surprise her with a vacation before taking the biggest step of my life again. He jumped up, hugged me hard, congratulating me for being ready to commit once more. I hugged him back, though not for the reason he thought. He agreed to block off the week, and I asked him to keep it quiet so it would be a surprise. Of course, I knew word would spread in the office. That was part of my design. That evening, I told Catherine I'd booked her and 2 of her friends a week-long spa retreat, all expenses paid. She squealed with excitement, like a child let loose in a candy shop. I then told her I'd be busy in the city preparing for a big client meeting and would fly out, not returning until after she was already gone. She looked a little disappointed, but I assured her the surprise would be worth it when she came back. What I didn't tell her was that I had quietly arranged a 2-week getaway for myself on the other side of the country, both to enjoy a taste of freedom and to brace myself for the storm that was about to break. 2 Sundays later, I returned and drove past my house. Sure enough, Harry's car was there, just as it had been the first night I caught them. I parked a little farther away and checked the cameras. They were asleep in my bed. No shock there. I already had 2 weeks' worth of recordings of them together. That's when I made my first call. Pretending to be a concerned neighbor, I told the police there was a man loitering in his car behind my property, occasionally handing things through car windows and peering into my yard. I said I suspected he might be dealing or planning a break-in. I gave them his license plate and vehicle description. They promised to send someone. Then I phoned Catherine, saying I'd be home in 10 minutes. I reminded her that although she was flying out the next day, I wanted to surprise her now. Watching the footage later, I laughed at the chaos I'd set off. Within seconds, Harry bolted shirtless out the back door and scrambled into his car. I couldn't have scripted it better. As he sped off, a police cruiser turned down the alley and immediately began pursuit. Perfect timing. I parked, greeted a very flustered Catherine, and played the part of the loving partner. We did the usual couple routines, then she fell asleep. I, of course, stayed awake. The next day, a taxi came to take her and her friends to the airport. Once they left, I waited a few hours, then called a friend in the moving business. I asked him to help me box up Catherine's belongings and put them into storage that Friday. He agreed. Later that day, the police called. They wanted me to come identify items seized from a suspect the night before, items that matched the list of stolen property I had reported. I smiled, realizing my setup for Harry was now in motion, and told them I'd come by soon. When I arrived, not all of my missing things had been found yet. They were likely still at his house, awaiting a full search. But it hardly mattered. In a town this small, gossip spreads faster than fire. Harry was already disgraced, and within days he was fired outright for drug possession and stolen goods. That same evening, the company's executives formally apologized to me on behalf of the firm. Afterward, I went to my parents' house and explained what had happened, leaving out a few of the uglier details, and told them, as well as Rachel's parents, that I'd accepted a promotion and was moving back to the city, but without Catherine. They were disappointed I hadn't confided in them sooner, but relieved to see I hadn't stooped to her level. They gave their blessing to my plan to simply vanish from her life. After a long night of drinks, laughter, and a few tears, I returned home. By Friday afternoon, after a grueling week of lining up cleaners, preparing the house for rental, and closing tasks at the local office, I packed up a few last items, stopped at my parents' to say goodbye, and then made one final detour. Becky, one of Rachel's closest childhood friends, had been my quiet accomplice. She was the only person, aside from my lawyer, who knew the truth, though I spared her the details about Harry. Without her help, I couldn't have pulled things together so quickly. I handed her a large envelope containing everything: video evidence of Catherine's affair, a personal letter, and legal documents drafted by my attorney forbidding Catherine from contacting me. It also included instructions on how she could retrieve her belongings from the storage unit I had rented. Becky promised to deliver it when the time came. Then I drove back to the city. On Sunday morning, I woke to a flood of missed calls, voicemails, and angry texts. Catherine had cut her trip short after hearing something had happened back home, only to find an empty house with a for rent sign planted in the yard. In a panic, she rushed to my parents' house. They closed the door in her face. She called around frantically until finally reaching Becky and learned about the envelope. As expected, she didn't take it well. Soon the messages began pouring in, furious accusations that I'd set up Harry, threats, pleas, everything in between. I half expected her to show up at my door in the city, but she never did. Now, to answer the questions people always ask, what happened to Harry? He's facing a few months behind bars. Since it's his first offense, he'll likely serve less, but I don't regret it. He grew up with Rachel and I, knew exactly how shattered I had been after losing her, and still chose betrayal. The police already had plenty to work with. All I did was give them a reason to look closer. What about Catherine? She fancied herself a socialite. Her status meant everything to her, and exposure was the only thing she couldn't survive. Word of her affair spread quickly in a small town. Her reputation was destroyed, and last I heard, she'd moved to another state because she couldn't handle the fallout. Was it legal? Surprisingly, yes. I covered every base with my lawyer. I had every right to move her belongings into storage, to cut her off, and to disappear. Morally, I know it was cold. I dangled what she thought was the happiest moment of her life, only to turn it into ashes. But that was the point, to let her feel the collapse I had felt once before. And finally, to those who think I'm lying, chasing internet clout, or that I'm some kind of sociopath, believe what you want. Stories like mine could happen anywhere. And as for labels, well, in this day and age, who doesn't have a touch of madness in them?
I live in my boyfriend's house, and his behavior keeps overwhelming me and triggering my anxiety. I'm 28, my boyfriend is 27. I moved in with him about 8 months ago. I'm disabled and have significant sensory issues. That part matters. In general, he tries to respect my needs. My boyfriend is a professional sculptor, and his studio is inside the house. It's placed in such a way that I have to walk through it to reach the bathroom or go outside. There's no other practical location for it. The problem is that his behavior while he's working affects me a lot. He wears headphones, blasts music, dances, sways, mimes singing. He says it helps him stay focused, and I do believe that. The core conflict is that he moves constantly, insisting it shouldn't matter because I can't hear anything. I've tried explaining that because of my sensory issues, it still overloads me, as if I can hear the music even when I don't. He suggested I just avoid that part of the house while he works, except that's where the bathroom is. There's also the issue of him bringing buyers into the house. We agreed he has to warn me ahead of time and ask if I'm okay with it, but he regularly breaks that rule. I come home to a stranger standing in my living room because he didn't expect me back. Having unknown people in the house spikes my anxiety so badly I need days to recover afterward. His solution? Again, just don't go through the studio. Except this is also my home now. Yesterday, well, actually the whole week had been terrible for me.
and I desperately needed peace in my own space. So I hid the key to his studio. I told him I'd give it back in an hour. I just needed a moment of complete calm. I even repeated his own logic back to him, saying maybe he should use another part of the house for a bit. I really was going to return the key after an hour, but he exploded. He said I was going to ruin one of his commissions by keeping him from working immediately. That triggered a severe anxiety episode for me. Here's where I probably messed up. I didn't return the key until evening. He thinks I acted like a jerk. I feel like I just needed a moment of quiet in my own home. What do you think? Update. I admit it now. Hiding his studio key was a terrible thing to do. It was a spiteful move, and I regret it. My boyfriend and I talked through several possible solutions, and none of them involve locking him out of his workspace. A few things people asked in comments. I asked my boyfriend directly if he thinks I'm abusive. He said no. To disabled people who said working through pain made them less patient with others, I'm genuinely sorry that your experience was so harsh. To non-disabled people who lectured me about work and government support, do you have any idea how impossible it is to get disability benefits here? They offered me no resources, no real help, and not even financial support to pay for the medical evaluations their system requires. Their solution was to offer training for jobs nobody would willingly do. For everyone asking about the house layout, I didn't design it. The bathroom is where it is. The studio is where it fits. Nothing I can do. For those saying my sensitivity isn't a disability, it is. Sensory disorders mean I pick up on subtle movements, vibrations, and tiny shifts that others don't even notice. One commenter said it doesn't sound like a major issue because he only dances in the room when I occasionally pass through. But that's not how it works. Even when I'm not in the room, knowing he's doing it keeps me on edge. I feel it in my body. His dancing and constant motion affect me the same way loud music or a crowded event would for anyone else. It drains me, it overstimulates me, and I can't relax until it stops. Living with my parents isn't an option. They dumped me on my sister, and she eventually dumped me somewhere else. I don't have a safety net. A lot of people here judged me, but disability truly means being limited. The less support and stability you have, the more your condition deteriorates and the less independent you can be. Someone suggested that he should only work on days when I can tolerate his movement. Reminder, he financially supports both of us. He works whenever inspiration hits, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes 8 or more at any time of day. I understand how creative work functions, but if I can compromise, he should be able to compromise a bit too. Maybe choose calmer working days when I'm overwhelmed, or shift his schedule slightly if it means I can stay functional. Another commenter said he has a right to bring clients home because the studio is there. True, but when I leave the house, I need a lot of time afterward to feel safe when I return. Coming back to strangers in my home destabilizes me. That's the situation. It's messy, complicated, and neither of us is perfect, but we're trying to figure it out.
When I suddenly come home and find someone else's presence lingering in my space, I can't unwind at all. It completely throws off my sense of safety, and that affects my health more than people think. After moments like that, I avoid leaving the house even more. Sometimes I can still feel a stranger's presence for weeks after they've already left. I get that people without sensory issues believe that's impossible, but think of how someone who survived a break-in feels afterward, like their personal space was invaded and the place they should feel safe suddenly isn't. That's exactly what happens to me. Right now, I'm basically financially trapped. If I could afford to live elsewhere, I probably would have already moved out, but I literally can't work because of my condition. That's why I moved in with him in the first place. It feels like being stuck no matter how much I want to fix things. I know I should be more patient, but we discussed my needs over and over even before I moved in, and it feels like all those conversations were erased. He's respectful in many everyday ways, but in these bigger issues, it's like he stops hearing me. He keeps saying I'm not stopping him from working, but that's not the point.
I simply cannot live alone and have nowhere else to go. Update number 1. I'm 27. My boyfriend is 28. I moved in with him last year after my sister, who I'd been living with, suddenly demanded that I leave. I have a disability, a severe sensory disorder, and I'm unable to work, so moving in with him was the only real option. I also struggle with being alone for extended periods because of my condition. The whole conflict revolves around his sculpture studio. To reach the bathroom or even step outside, I have to walk through the space where he works. He dances constantly while he's sculpting, and he brings clients and buyers into the house. All of that makes me feel unsafe. For most people, it probably sounds like nothing, but his movements drain me physically. Even when I'm not in the room, I feel him dancing, and it overwhelms me to the point of anxiety. Strangers inside the house can trigger a full panic attack and leave me shaken for days. We've talked so many times about what I need to feel safe, but no matter how many conversations we have, nothing changes in the long run. Although in many everyday tasks he's considerate, when it comes to the core issues, he doesn't seem to grasp how serious they are. Recently we argued. I hid the key to his studio because I was absolutely burned out and desperate for at least 1 hour of silence in the place that's supposed to be my home too. I admit it was the wrong choice, but when I'm overwhelmed, I can't think clearly or make rational decisions. I just wanted my boundaries respected. Some people asked what I contribute to the relationship. I contribute emotionally and take care of daily tasks. I don't judge a person's value by their income, and I believed my boyfriend thought the same. I clean, take care of the dog, help with chores, support him emotionally, and have been by his side for a long time. Strangely, I can tolerate crowded places more easily than these situations at home, because when I step outside, I mentally prepare myself for noise and stimuli. At home, I expect peace. On good days, I visit the beach nearby or take small trips to stores. I asked him to work on a schedule so I could predict when he would be in the studio. Structure helps me manage my energy, and sometimes I need him to adjust on difficult days. I would prefer buyers not to come inside the house at all, but if it's unavoidable, they could meet him in the backyard patio next to the studio, something we had agreed on from the beginning. But he still kept bringing buyers inside whenever he thought I wasn't home, and multiple times I came back earlier and ran into them anyway. We also discussed establishing a clear routine so I could prepare myself mentally. I even asked politely, never demanding, if he could simply avoid dancing when I'm home. People in offices or stores don't dance while working because it distracts others, so I honestly don't think my request is unreasonable, especially considering how badly it affects my health. Update number 2. From the boyfriend. Unique translation. I'm almost 30. My girlfriend is 2. She moved in with me last year. She has a severe sensory disorder, and her move coincided with major financial problems. I could support her, and I truly believed I could adjust to her needs. I've depended on others before, and I had friends who supported me during hard times. I wanted to be that person for her. But over time, the tension between us kept building. Everyday things bothered her because of her sensory issues. I tried adjusting everything: new furniture, reduced noise and smells, restricting my work to one area, avoiding guests, taking hobbies aside. Each time I fixed something, a new issue appeared. Eventually, it felt like even my existence in certain parts of the house irritated her. I started feeling unwelcome in my own home, even though she still relied on my emotional and financial support. My work began to suffer, and resentment started growing in ways I didn't like. I gently encouraged her to seek professional help, but she took it as criticism. We drifted further apart. She became more verbally hostile and withdrawn. I have my own mental health struggles, so all this hit me extremely hard. I battled guilt and depression for months. The breaking point was when I started missing deadlines. It became easier not to come home than to try working in that environment.
I've spent years building my career, something that gives me real purpose, and I watched it start to crumble. One day, I came home, walked into her room, and told her I couldn't keep living like this. She broke down, saying she couldn't survive alone. I opened my mouth and said words I regret even now. Well, then I guess you're screwed. I added that if she can't live alone, can't live with others, and refuses help, then she's doomed. As soon as the words left my mouth, I saw her face. Fear, hurt, betrayal. That expression will stay with me forever. I'm staying at a hotel now while figuring out the logistics of separating. She won't speak to me, only texted that what I said traumatized her. I need to know if I crossed a moral line. The relationship is over. I only want to know whether I was wrong in that moment. Someone mentioned a post from months ago that sounded identical to our situation. When I saw it, I realized it was us. Seeing everything written out so plainly hit me harder than I expected. There have been no further updates since then.
My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome, but my parents forced me to hand it over to my golden child's sister. She ended up crashing on the way to the airport, so I took my ticket back and went anyway. Hi, I'm 18, and for my birthday, my grandparents on my dad's side gifted me a plane ticket to Rome plus a check for travel expenses. I was beyond excited, but the very next day, my parents started pressuring me to be selfless and give the trip to my older sister, June. She's 21 and the golden child of the family, if that wasn't already obvious. Their excuse? June is studying architecture, and seeing Rome in person would be an amazing opportunity for her resume and her language skills. I pointed out that I'm going into literature, and Rome would be just as valuable for me, but they didn't care. The kicker? June had already been given the same choice at 18. Grandparents offered her a trip abroad, but she turned it down and asked for cash instead. My turn finally came, and suddenly I'm not allowed to enjoy it. For weeks, the arguments dragged on. My parents guilt-tripped me, listing every sacrifice they've made for me, calling it a small favor to give up this trip. I resisted at first, until one day they slipped up and said they didn't want the trip wasted on me. That broke me. Basically, if I went, it was worthless, but if June went, it mattered. They tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Eventually, I gave in and said, fine, whatever. I figured there was no way the airline would even allow them to change the ticket, so I still had my check at least. But somehow, they pulled strings. On the day of the flight, June showed up with my boarding pass and headed to the airport instead. And then, karma hit. On the way, we got a call. June had been in a car accident. Apparently, she grabbed the steering wheel of the taxi because she thought the driver was taking the wrong route. The car spun out and hit a tree. June walked away with scratches, but the poor driver took the full impact. Broken arm, deep head gash, hospitalized. He's suing her now, and my parents are panicking, trying to cover the damages with their savings. When they told me what happened, I snapped. The words just slipped out. That's karma for forcing me to give up Rome. They were horrified, told me I was heartless, that words carry weight, and now they finally saw my true selfish nature. Hypocrisy much? They literally told me my trip would be wasted if I went, but apparently that wasn't cruel. Furious, I grabbed a small bag, ordered a taxi, and headed to the hospital myself. I realized in that moment, no matter what I did, my family would never see me as worthy or equal, so why keep sacrificing for them? When I arrived, June was busy spinning her version of the accident to the cops, trying to claim it wasn't her fault. I didn't even bother arguing. I just walked up and asked her one thing. Do you still have my boarding pass? Update. My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome. My parents forced me to give it to my golden child's sister. She crashed on the way to the airport, and I ended up taking the ticket back and flying anyway. So, yeah, here's what happens next. When I confronted June at the hospital, she looked completely stunned and confused. I didn't even wait for her to respond. I grabbed her bag, dug through it, and found my boarding pass. Without another word, I bolted out, jumped into the taxi, and rushed straight to the airport. I barely made it in time, but somehow, against all odds, I ended up on the plane. And then it hit me. I was actually flying to Rome. I didn't check my phone until I landed. And wow, my family is furious. My parents think I'm a heartless monster because, in their words, I abandoned my sister after the accident. The accident she caused herself, might I add. June is pissed because she claims I stole her chance, when in reality, she stole mine first. All I did was take back what was mine to begin with. Apparently, the family consensus is that I was wrong and owe everyone an apology. June even texted me that her parents are draining their savings to pay off the taxi driver who's suing her for damages, and that I should be helpful by handing over the birthday check my grandparents gave me. According to her, I'm selfish for traveling while the family is suffering. But honestly, I don't think I owe anyone anything. To answer some of the questions people had, the boarding pass issue. I'm 99% sure my parents never actually figured out how to legally transfer the ticket. June probably just planned to show up and bluff her way through security. If they'd really switched the booking, I wouldn't have been able to board with my passport. So their plan was just smoke and mirrors, and it backfired. Why I still live at home? It's complicated. I grew up believing that if I just tried harder, my parents would eventually treat me like they treat June. I spent 18 years trying to earn their love, never realizing how toxic that mindset was. Moving in with my grandparents never seemed like an option. They live far out of town, and honestly, I thought keeping the peace with my parents was my best shot. Spoiler, it wasn't. But now I'm realizing I don't have to live like this anymore. My relationship with June? We've never been close. I don't hate her, she doesn't hate me, we just don't get along. She's always been controlling, the kind of person who had to sit in the front seat even on family trips. So of course she tried to take the wheel from the taxi driver because she thought she knew the faster route. That's exactly the kind of thing she does. And yes, my parents aren't doing great financially. Mom's a nurse, dad's a high school football coach. They rely heavily on my grandparents' help. Now, with this lawsuit hanging over them, they're in real trouble. If they want financial help from my grandparents, they'll have to admit what actually happened, which I doubt they're eager to do.
Update number 1. I've had a couple of days to think it over, and honestly, I've decided not to waste this trip worrying about my parents or June. This is probably the last chance I'll get for years. Once I start college, I won't have this kind of freedom again. So I'm going to enjoy Rome. My sister made her choices, my parents made theirs. For once in my life, I'm choosing me. Update number 2. My Rome trip changed everything. Now I live with my grandparents. They're adults and they can deal with their own mess. It's not my fault they tried to take something that was never theirs to begin with and ended up facing the consequences. You guys were right. It was foolish of me to ever expect them to appreciate my sacrifice. They'll always resent me no matter what I do. So why should I keep giving up my happiness for them? Right now, I'm having the best time of my life in Rome. This morning, I finally opened up to my grandparents about everything. How my parents have treated me all these years, how they've always put June first, and how I was constantly overlooked. Even my closest friends never knew the full story. So telling my grandparents felt like a huge weight lifted off my chest. They were shocked that it had gone on for so long and that I kept quiet. I told them I always thought if I just stay quiet and keep trying to be the perfect daughter, eventually my parents will love me too. But now I finally understand. That day will never come. My grandparents told me I did the right thing. They insisted that when I come back from Rome, I should go straight to their house instead of my parents'. They said they'll make all the arrangements for me to move in with them. When I reminded them that I'll be starting college in the fall, they smiled and said that's not a problem. They'll cover all my expenses themselves. That one conversation literally changed my life. For the first time, I know where I'll belong when I return. My parents are furious, of course. They never planned to pay for my college anyway. They had told me from the start that since they already paid for June's education, I was on my own. But now it doesn't matter. I'll be okay. Update number 3. My trip ended a few days ago, and I'm officially living with my grandparents. When I got back, I went straight to their house, and to my surprise, they had already prepared a guest room for me and even hired movers to bring all my things from my parents' place. They welcomed me so warmly, I almost cried. They told me what happened after our phone call. Apparently, the night of June's accident, my parents had called my grandparents asking for help. They didn't want to dip into their own savings or risk a lawsuit, especially since the dashcam footage clearly showed June was at fault. The only way out was a settlement, but the taxi driver was asking for a huge sum. When they all met, my grandparents first asked my parents about me, whether it was true they had always treated me unfairly and even forced me to give up my Rome trip. My parents tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't the time to discuss me since I was off partying in Rome. But my grandparents pressed, and eventually my parents snapped and admitted everything. They said yes, it was true, but claimed I deserved it because I abandoned the family when things got hard. They accused me of showing up at the hospital only to snatch the boarding pass, not caring about June. They even said I'd always been jealous because June was better at everything. Then they called me spoiled and selfish and told my grandparents that when I returned, they wouldn't tolerate me anymore. That was the final straw. My grandparents cut ties with them on the spot. My parents told them if they wanted to take me in, then fine, because they were done with me anyway. Hearing all this broke my heart. Deep down, I always knew my parents didn't care about me, but having them outright say it, that hurt more than I can describe. I cried so much that night. But through it all, my grandparents stood by me. They've shown me what family is supposed to feel like. For the first time in my life, I finally feel safe. This is my home now until I leave for college in a couple of months. And honestly, I couldn't be more grateful. Update number 4. My grandparents completely changed my life, and my parents got a reality check. When I leave for college, I won't have to worry about a thing. My grandparents are covering all my expenses. Since returning, I haven't spoken to my parents or June at all. I didn't even read their last messages because I wanted to just enjoy my trip. June's messages were all the same, calling me selfish, spoiled, worthless, and saying she's glad she doesn't have to deal with me anymore because I'm unworthy of her company. Honestly, I think she got it backwards. She's the one unworthy of mine. But I really don't care. The words that hurt most come from my parents, though even their words no longer surprise me.
They sent messages accusing me of being heartless, saying they should have stopped me at the hospital, claiming it was their fault for not raising me properly, and pointing out that even at the hospital, I escaped to go on the trip. They kept repeating things like, "We did everything to give you a comfortable life." Comfortable life doesn't equal good childhood, I thought. Sure, they fed me, clothed me, and put a roof over my head, but that doesn't erase years of neglect, favoritism, and emotional harm. They said I complained out of jealousy of June, and therefore calling them villains was unfair. Then they concluded by calling me a void, saying I wasted their time and energy, and now they're finally happy without me. It stung, and I nearly cried. But after talking with my grandparents, I promised myself I would no longer let their cruel words break me. I blocked my parents, cutting off all contact. I need to start healing and maybe erase their toxic influence from my mind. I don't know if I can do it completely,
but I will try. The funniest, most insane part happened today. It's been almost 2 weeks since I returned from Rome. I had no clue what was going on with my parents or June. I assumed they were still scrambling money for the taxi settlement. But today, out of nowhere, my parents showed up at my grandparents' house, clearly ready for revenge. Thankfully, they didn't even acknowledge me. They went straight to the living room where my grandparents were. I froze, unsure what to do, but my grandparents told me to sit with them. They could see the looks on my parents' faces, annoyance, anger, but nothing was said out loud. When my grandparents asked why they had come, the parents said they still expected compensation for all the money they supposedly spent on me over the years. They pulled out documents claiming I owed them almost $120,000 for raising me. I was floored. The audacity. These were the people who had done the bare minimum, and now they were trying to profit off of it? My grandparents calmly asked to speak privately, leaving me out. After a few tense minutes, they came back and said they were willing to pay, but only if my parents returned all the money they had borrowed from my grandparents over the years. That was it. My parents were completely blindsided, and I couldn't stop laughing. Eventually, they shouted, slammed the door, and left. I don't think they'll be back anytime soon, and honestly, it doesn't matter. My grandparents have proven they can handle them, and my father being their only son doesn't change anything. I leave for college in a few months, and for the first time in my life, I'm genuinely excited. Looking back, going to Rome was probably the best decision I've ever made. It not only gave me an amazing trip, but also helped me finally claim my life and freedom.
The entitled lady at Starbucks. A woman with an inflated ego decided that using mobile orders was unfair and demanded that I wait in line, even though my drink was already paid for and ready. I'm 28. There's a Starbucks conveniently located near my therapist's office, and over the past few months, I've gotten into the habit of grabbing a sugary drink before each session. Don't judge me. I know those 400-calorie whipped cream-topped sugar bombs aren't real coffee, but that overpriced $10 liquid dessert is my small comfort before diving into emotional self-improvement. Yesterday morning, on my way to therapy, I made a rare, smart decision. I ordered ahead through the app to avoid the lunchtime rush. Perfect timing. 10 minutes later, I walked in just as the barista was finishing my pumpkin spice cold brew. She called my name, and I happily stepped forward to grab it. But before I could pick it up, a manicured hand gently landed on my forearm. The hand belonged to a woman who looked about 35. Polished, confident, wrapped in a flawless linen suit. Her sleek ponytail, gold jewelry, and designer bag practically scream, "I'm important." She exuded that unmistakable aura of superiority, chin slightly raised, posture perfect, as if she believed the air around her was more refined than everyone else's. For simplicity, let's call her Miss Entitlement. Her smile looked polite, but her tone was sugary sweet and condescending, like a teacher correcting a clueless child. "That's not yours," she said softly. I frowned, confused. I checked the cup. My name was written right there. "Oh, sorry. Do you have the same name? I think this one's mine. What did you order?" She shook her head, the smile tightening. "No, my name's much longer than that. I ordered a hot soy matcha with 2 pumps of vanilla." "Ah, then this definitely isn't yours. This one's a pumpkin spice cold brew. Maybe yours is still coming out. You could ask the barista." I reached for my cup again, but her manicured claws tightened around my arm. Her mask slipped, and that fake smile cracked. "You didn't say it was mine," she snapped. "I said it's not yours. I saw you walk in and grab the first drink you saw. You can't do that. You need to wait in line like everyone else." It finally clicked. "Oh, I ordered through the app. It's prepaid and ready for pickup. See?" I pulled up my confirmation email on my phone and showed her. "Order placed 12 minutes ago, paid in full." She barely glanced at it before smacking my hand away, hard enough to leave a red mark. "You can't just walk in and take it," she hissed. "I don't care if it's your drink. It's not fair to everyone else who's waiting." I stood there,
stunned. Did this stranger seriously just hit me over a Starbucks order? Around us, maybe 8 people were waiting for their drinks, with another dozen still in line. She honestly thought I should wait behind all of them just to satisfy her warped sense of fairness? I locked eyes with the barista, who looked exhausted, the kind of weary look only years of customer service trauma can create. She sighed and approached us cautiously. "Hi, is there a problem here?" Before I could answer, Miss Entitlement jumped in. "Yes, this girl just walked in, grabbed a random drink, and won't wait her turn. Tell her to get back in line." I held up my phone. "That's not true. This is my drink. I ordered it through the app. Here's the confirmation, and the name matches the cup. Look." The barista double-checked my phone, glanced at the label, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, this order is hers. She paid in advance." The entitled woman's jaw tightened. "I don't care if she paid. I've been waiting here like everyone else. She doesn't get special treatment." The barista's tone stayed calm, but firm. Her order came through the mobile system earlier, so it was prepared in order of receipt. You're welcome to use the app next time to skip the line. But you can't stop other customers from collecting their drinks or use physical force. Please step aside or I'll have to ask you to leave. Miss Entitlement's face flushed crimson. "No, I want my drink and she can wait like everyone else. Make my matcha first. I don't care if hers is done." I sighed. "I'm actually running late for an appointment, so can I just take my drink and go? Also, she hit me. There's a red mark on my arm. Maybe call security?" The barista nodded. "Yeah, I think that's best." Up until that moment, Miss Entitlement hadn't raised her voice. She'd been calmly dripping venom with that infuriatingly patronizing tone, like she thought we'd all eventually come to our senses and realize she was right. But when the barista finally handed me my drink, her composure shattered. Her face twisted with pure rage as she turned on the poor employee. "This is ridiculous. Your system is broken. Do you have any idea who I am? You'll regret this. Get your manager now." And that, my friends, is how I got smacked in the hand by a Starbucks Karen because she doesn't understand how mobile orders work.
I didn't do anything wrong. I paid for my drink, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll sit here and enjoy it. I have every legal right to do so, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. While the demon continued her tantrum, I glanced at the unflappable barista. She blinked heavily, and for a moment I thought she might actually cry. But then I realized this battle-hardened warrior was simply restraining the urge to roll her eyes. She met my gaze and gave a subtle nod toward the door. After years of surviving the front lines of customer service hell, she could handle this herself. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, letting me pass toward the exit. Just as I reached the door, the elegant woman realized her prey was escaping and screeched, "Hey, where do you think you're going? She can't just leave. Someone stop her. I said she has to wait her turn like everyone else." I raised a single finger in her direction and slipped out the back door just as the bell above the entrance jingled. A security guard had arrived. Beelzebub's righteous tirade immediately shifted gears. Now she was shouting that she had every right to be there, that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that she refused to be kicked out. She demanded her money back, a free matcha, and a formal apology right now. Each sentence was punctuated by the sound of her slapping the counter. Her indignant screeching slowly faded behind the closing door as I walked away, holding my well-earned cold brew like a trophy. I like to imagine the guard didn't have to physically throw her out. Though honestly, knowing her, she probably regained her composure, lifted her chin, and swept out like an insulted duchess, muttering something about her lawyer. As I sipped that heavenly pumpkin-spiced madness, I pictured a lonely venti soy matcha latte, extra hot, 2 pumps of vanilla, slowly cooling on the counter. And somewhere, a decaffeinated Beelzebub was probably raging in her fancy office. That thought made every sip taste even sweeter. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect so many people that actually read this all the way through. I figured I'd take a minute to answer a few common questions that keep popping up in the comments.
Yes, I'm Australian, and yes, this really happened here. About the infamous pumpkin-flavored monstrosity, I fully admit I have the world's worst taste in coffee, but drinking something that tastes like a scented candle has always been a weird little dream of mine. And you know what? Shockingly good. Props to America for that one. To those asking why I didn't stand up for myself, I'm a lover, not a fighter, meaning I literally can't fight. If I tried to punch her, I'd probably hurt my own hand more than her face. Plus, I didn't want to get banned from the only Starbucks I ever go to, or, get charged with assault. Why didn't I call the police? I was already late for therapy, and I didn't want to spend hours giving a statement. She didn't really hit me, more like a slap on the wrist that left a red mark for a while. No bruise, nothing worth reporting. Should I have thrown my drink on her? Absolutely not. I'd rather calmly sip my $9 coffee milkshake in peace. Besides, if I'd made a mess, the poor employees would have had to clean it, not her. Oh, and shout out to the guy who literally made a fake account just to send me a death threat because he didn't like my tone and thinks I'm a stuck-up witch. Honestly, kind of flattering. That's a lot of effort for one hate message. If you're reading this, send me your name and address. I promise I won't forward it to the cops. And finally, to everyone who made it this far, thank you. It's nice knowing someone actually reads this stuff. This was fun to write, but it's now 4 a.m. and I'm about to crash. Let's see what chaos tomorrow brings. Before we move on to the next story, I've got a question for you. What would you do in this situation? Actually, it reminded me of something that happened to me recently. It's kind of similar. I'd ordered a shawarma through an app, got a notification that it was ready, but when I arrived, I had no idea where to pick it up. The girl behind the counter, she was serving someone else, totally silent, and I just stood there, waiting, confused. I finally asked, "Hey, can I pick up my shawarma?" And she just didn't answer. Awkward silence. I waited until she finished with the customer, asked again, and she finally handed it to me. I said, "You could have just said something," and she replied, "Can't you see I'm serving someone?" Like, what? I was new there, didn't know how pickup worked, and she couldn't spare 2 words to clarify? Some people just really hate being mildly helpful. Anyway, what do you think? Was she totally right to ignore me? Or was that just bad customer service? Curious to hear your thoughts, because like in the Starbucks story, sometimes these wait your turn situations aren't as black and white as they seem.